Chapter 8:16, Bullying a Great Lord. What a powerful summoning skill. Autumn Goose and the others were shocked when they saw Aqua Rose's 3 level 39 elite-ranked blue fire crows. Generally, summoners could only summon 1 elite or a few common monsters. Aqua Rose, however, had summoned 3 elite monsters at one time. This was the equivalent of adding 3 powerful melee fighters to their team. Turtledove threw her shield at the agonizing Banshee, slamming it into the Banshee's head. Not only did this attack interrupt the Great Lord's Tier 2 spell casting, but it also achieved a critical hit, dealing nearly -5,000 damage. The agonizing Banshee was enraged. She pointed a finger at Turtledove. Immediately, 8 black fog spears shot towards the Guardian Knight. These black fog spears had significantly damaged the Immortal Light members when they had faced her. As the spears were incredibly powerful, even when the Immortal Light's MTs blocked the attack with their shields, they had lost nearly 4,000 HP. Worse yet, the Banshee had launched 8 of these spears. Even an MT would lose their life if they received 4 or 5 spears. "That won't work against me," Turtledove declared. Rather than retreating, she charged towards the black fog spears. Just before the spears reached her, Turtledove raised her shield and leaped forward, smashing into one of the black fog spears. The remaining spears simply flew past Turtledove's body, missing her completely. Boom. Upon collision, Turtledove was forced back by 2 steps. She lost nearly 1,800 HP. In the next moment, however, a healing light touched the Guardian Knight, returning her HP to full status immediately. "That is an MT from Zero Wing?" Sindhart was astonished as he watched Turtledove handle the agonizing Banshee's attacks so gracefully. When their strongest MT blocked one of the black fog spears, he had lost over 3,400 HP instantly. In addition, due to the incredible speed of the spears, he hadn't been able to avoid the following attacks in time. Generally, he would receive roughly 3 spears, destroying more than half of his HP. On the other hand, Turtledove had neutralized the black fog spears with such ease. The other Immortal Light members were similarly stupefied when they saw Turtledove tank a Great Lord by herself. None of them could believe their eyes. Normally, they needed at least 4 or 5 MTs to rotate tanking a single Great Lord. Even so, there were times when they failed to hold the boss. Turtledove was definitely stronger than they were. However, the members of Immortal Light did not know that Turtledove currently wore a Tier 1 set equipment. Her plate armor was even epic rank. Although equipping the Divine Frost armor had caused Turtledove to lose the final set effect of the Yin-Yang Walker set equipment, the former not only reduced the damage she took, but one of its passive skills also reduced the agonizing Banshee's movement speed and attack speed. Although the black fog spears were quite fast, Turtledove could easily determine the best evasion route with the speed reduction effect. Moreover, Turtledove was a Guardian Knight. Her magic resistance was very high. With over 18,000 HP, she could even survive a direct hit from a Tier 2 spell. Very quickly, Cola and Turtledove had pinned down the 2 Great Lords. Now, everyone just needed to focus everything they had on 2 bosses. Are those monsters really Great Lords? Blue Bamboo felt as if she were dreaming as she watched Turtledove tank the agonizing Banshee without assistance. Even now, she alone had maintained Turtledove's HP at full. Normally, when she raided High Lords with Autumn Goose and the others, they needed at least 3 healers to focus on a single MT. Even so, their heals were not always sufficient. Yet, despite facing a Great Lord, only she was the only necessary healer to keep Turtledove alive. Autumn Goose also wondered if the agonizing Banshee seemed very weak. She even doubted that the MT needed her assistance as she focused solely on damage. However, Autumn Goose was very aware. The agonizing Banshee was not weak at all. Rather, Zero Wing's members were just that strong, which resulted in such a misconception. Only now did she understand why Shifeng had been so confident, why all of these experts from Zero Wing were so confident. Now that the MTs had solidified their hold on the bosses, Zero Wing's members had no issue dealing sufficient damage. The assassin class relied on speed to deal massive amounts of damage over time. Fire Dance, however, played the class differently. Standing behind the skeleton general, Fire Dance launched streak after streak of silver light at the Great Lord. Despite the skeleton general's incredible defense, the female assassin's damage was mind-boggling. -9,480. -30,121. -16,916. -20,518. Shifeng's damage was also impressive. None of his attacks dealt less than -6,000 damage. From time to time, his chop achieved a critical hit, dealing over -20,000 damage with a single attack. As for the other melee classes like Shadow Sword and Rampant Blade, they never dealt less than -3,000 damage. With their powers combined, these several players devoured the Skeleton General's HP of 18 million at a rate visible to the naked eye. Are they even human? The Immortal Light members were astonished. The total damage Shi Feng, Fire Dance, Shadow Sword, Rampant Blade, Blackie, and a few other core members of Zero Wing dealt was higher than their 100-man team's total damage. Previously, their attacks had only dealt over -1,000 damage to the Great Lord. Even Sind Heart, the most powerful player on the team, had only dealt over -2,000 damage to the Skeleton General. Shi Feng and Fire Dance, however, easily managed tens of thousands of damage. From time to time, they even dealt over -30,000 damage. Despite the Skeleton General and Agonizing Banshee being two daunting Great Lords, against Zero Wing, they were no different than helpless common monsters. The two bosses could only struggle against the small team of players. Even with its prided speed and strength, the Skeleton General in particular, rarely landed a hit on the Guardian Knight Cola due to Fire Dance and Shi Feng's coordinated attacks. Even when the Great Lord used a Tier 2 skill, Cola easily took the hit with a life-saving skill. As for the team's healers, aside from the slight pressure they felt when the Skeleton General used a powerful skill, they needed to do so little to keep their companions alive that they had time to join the attack on the Great Lords. In just 5 minutes, the Skeleton General's HP fell to 30%. Wumian, pin one of them down and leave the other to me. Everyone else, focus on the Skeleton General. Cola is tanking. Shi Feng shouted after seeing the Skeleton General begin to split itself into 3 clones. Although this move was quite powerful, all 3 copies shared the same HP. As long as they had enough players to tank the 3 Skeleton Generals, they could cope. As soon as the Skeleton General had completed its cloning, Yi Wumian lured one away. As for Shi Feng, he activated Heavenly Dragon's power. After all was said and done, a Great Lord was still a Great Lord. Unlike MTs, Shi Feng did not possess any damage reduction skills or very high defense. He didn't have a shield either. If he wanted to withstand the boss's attacks, he had to rely on his own strength. Unfortunately, he could not contend with a level 43 Great Lord with his normal strength attribute. Only by activating a Berserk skill could he pin a Skeleton General down by himself. Among the many Berserk skills Shi Feng possessed, Heavenly Dragon's power had the shortest cooldown, which was 3 hours. The Power of Darkness had a 6-hour cooldown, whereas Blade Liberation had a 10-hour cooldown. The last one also had side effects he needed to worry about. Hence, Dragon's Power was Shi Feng's best option. Moreover, Heavenly Dragon's Power was his best-suited Berserk skill for head-on confrontations. It was the best option against bosses. Chapter 8:17, Suffocatingly Explosive Power. What is he trying to do? Sind Heart and the others were confused as they watched Shi Feng charge towards a Skeleton General. No swordsman could solo a Great Lord. Even a Berserker, a class famed for its strength, would fly through the air if they tried to block a Great Lord's attack with their weapons. Shi Feng used Killing Ray to block one of the Skeleton General's descending battle axes. Sure enough, my attributes aren't high enough to deal with this Great Lord. The resulting impact had forced Shi Feng to retreat by 3 steps, his hand numbing slightly. Meanwhile, a damage of over -700 points appeared above his head. However, to Shi Feng, who had close to 50,000 HP after activating Heavenly Dragon's power, such a small amount of damage was nothing. His battle recovery regenerated nearly 500 HP every 5 seconds. Violet Cloud waved her staff, and immediately, a faint golden film blanketed Shi Feng's body. Bluish-green life force flowed into the swordsman. Suddenly, a recovering status appeared over Shi Feng's status bar, recovering over 1,600 HP every 5 seconds for 15 seconds. In the blink of an eye, Shi Feng's HP was full. Seeing that its first attack had failed, the Skeleton General swung its other battle axe at Shi Feng violently. Having predicted the Skeleton General's attacks, Shi Feng sidestepped abruptly, using the Abyssal Blade to receive the descending battle axe while thrusting Killing Ray towards the Skeleton General's armor. A streak of blue light flashed. Although Killing Ray could not compare to the fragmented legendary rank 1000 transformations, after equipping a magic device, its sharpness was only slightly weaker than the 1000 transformations. As a result, it easily pierced the Skeleton General's robust armor. A critical damage of minus 15,824 points appeared above the skeleton general's head. The Great Lord bellowed, angry with the damage it had received. Suddenly, its battle axes released a strange, smoldering green flame as it swung the weapons at the ground. The ground instantly shattered, flames surging into the sky and covering a radius of 15 yards. Shi Feng had long since prepared for this moment. He jumped up and passed the skeleton general's head. He then used one of Killing Ray's skills, Summon Lightning. Arcs of blue lightning descended and struck the skeleton general's battle axes. The collision's impact was massive. Shi Feng then utilized the force of the impact to avoid the smoldering flames. He then activated Silent Steps and appeared behind the skeleton general, the sacred sword in his hand releasing a dazzling, flaming glow. Flame burst. 15 brilliant explosions discharged behind the skeleton general, one after another. Minus 48,167. Minus 117,954. Minus 49,715. 15 damages appeared above the general's head, one after another. Killing Ray had a 50% critical rate. In the blink of an eye, the skeleton general lost over 1 million HP. For a time, Autumn Goose, Sindheart, and the others were speechless. They sucked in a breath of cold air, not believing their eyes. Shi Feng's damage was insane. He had dealt over 1 million HP. Even a level 40 chieftain only had so much HP. Shi Feng had the power to instant-kill a level 40 chieftain. This power was no longer that of a player. This was the power of a humanoid great lord. However, Shi Feng did not think much of his attack. After all, his strength attribute was almost on par with a chieftain of the same level. After Heavenly Dragon's power doubled his strength, he surpassed ordinary lords of the same level. He had also used his sure kill skill, Flame Burst. Being capable of instant-killing a chieftain of the same level was expected. Flame Burst was not called a sure kill skill for no reason. Shi Feng's Flame Burst had heavily wounded the skeleton general. The swordsman had destroyed nearly half of its armor. Several bones beneath the armor had even cracked. "Focus on killing my skeleton general," Shi Feng shouted to his team. Not only had the general lost some of its combat power after receiving the several injuries, but its defense had also dropped significantly. Hence, dealing with this skeleton general would be much easier than dealing with the other two. Sure enough, in less than 1 minute, the skeleton general's HP fell below 500,000. Just before the general died, Shi Feng shouted once more, commanding, "Everyone switch to the Banshee. Turtledove, tank this skeleton general." "What is Big Brother Yi Feng trying to do?" Blue Bamboo asked, confused. If they finished off the skeleton general, it would become much easier to deal with the agonizing Banshee, yet Shi Feng decided not to kill the skeleton general. No matter how she looked at it, the decision was unwise. Blue Bamboo wasn't the only one who was confused. Experts like Thoughtful Rain and Autumn Goose didn't understand either. However, none of Zero Wing's members doubted Shi Feng's command. Immediately, they shifted their focus towards the agonizing Banshee. Turtledove swapped targets with Shi Feng. However, the agonizing Banshee couldn't care less about the sudden change as it continued to attack Turtledove with black fog spears. "I am your opponent." Shi Feng appeared behind Turtledove, the killing ray transforming into numerous streaks of blue light. Players usually suffered heavy injuries if the black fog spears struck them, yet Shi Feng easily shattered each one. "Is this an expert of Starmoon Kingdom's #1 guild?" Sindheart was astounded. He felt his chest tighten, struggling to breathe. Zero Wing was far more frightening than the rumors make the guild out to be. It was no wonder why even Emperor's Light, a first-rate guild in the Twin Towers Kingdom, feared Zero Wing, choosing to give up in Starmoon Kingdom entirely. After Shi Feng shattered the black fog spears, he vanished, abruptly reappearing before the agonizing Banshee. Arcs of blue electricity circled his body. Tier 2 Taboo skill Instant Strike. For 3 seconds, Shi Feng's attack speed increased by 500%, and his damage increased by 400%. Before the agonizing Banshee could react, over a dozen streaks of blue light wrapped around her body. Minus 21,046. Minus 43,248. Minus 42,987. In the blink of an eye, the agonizing Banshee's aggro shifted to Shi Feng. However, even though Shi Feng now held the Great Lord's aggro, the situation had not changed. The agonizing Banshee was a magical class monster. Even as a great lord, her strength could not compare to Shifeng's while he had a berserk skill active. As the Banshee began to cast another spell, Shifeng struck, interrupting her casting. For 3 whole seconds the agonizing Banshee could not use a single spell. Instead she lost more than 1,000,000 HP. Suddenly, Fire Dance appeared behind the agonizing Banshee, launching a sneak attack at the back of the Great Lord's head and forcing her into a fainted state for 2 seconds. She then used the Tier 1 skill 5-star Burst. -16,718. -34,297. 5 numbers appeared above the agonizing Banshee's head in quick succession, only slightly lower than the damage of Shifeng's normal attacks while in a berserk state. Following which, the agonizing Banshee received a one-sided beating, her HP draining like flowing water. When her HP reached 30%, the Great Lord was thoroughly enraged. As the agonizing Banshee released a piercing scream, a massive black magic array appeared in the sky. Everyone immediately felt their strength leave their bodies. Crap. This spell absorbs player stamina. Fire Dance immediately noticed the abnormality. If players ran out of stamina even with godlike combat power, they were helpless. At this rate, they'd run out of stamina in 30 seconds. After that, they would be sheep for the slaughter. Not today. Shifeng, who had long since prepared for such a situation, switched to the Aura of Time and activated Absolute Time, freezing the mana fluctuations in the surrounding area. Although Absolute Time's duration on a Great Lord was less than 10 seconds, interrupting the agonizing Banshee's mana channeling was enough. After losing its supply of mana, the gigantic magic array in the sky gradually dissipated. Seeing this, the members of Immortal Light finally understood how presumptuous they had been, thinking that they could raid South Lake City's Great Lords. Seconds flew by. Finally, both the agonizing Banshee and Skeleton General's HPs were below 100,000. Shifeng activated Divine Providence, significantly increasing his luck attribute. He then used Thundering Flash to finish off the agonizing Banshee, before following up with a Thunder Flame explosion on the Skeleton General. After a momentary struggle, the agonizing Banshee and the Skeleton General fell to the ground, one after the other, dropping several items around their bodies. Chapter 8:18, Abyss Set. Chapter 8:18 Abyss Set. It's over? Autumn Goose wondered if she were dreaming as she stared at the 2 fallen Great Lords before her. In the current God's domain, Great Lords struck fear into every player's heart. Even a 100-man elite team, led by an expert, would find it extremely difficult to defeat one. They might even be annihilated. Yet now, this team of 20 players had defeated 2 Great Lords simultaneously. Moreover, a few of the team members had held back. No matter how she looked at this situation, it simply could not be real. Looking at it now, Autumn Goose found that the Wind God's spears simply could not compare to Zero Wing in terms of strength. They lived in entirely different worlds. If not for Thoughtful Rain, they probably would never have met Shifeng and the other core members of Zero Wing. When she thought back to how they had tried to persuade Thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo to leave Zero Wing and join the Wind God's spear, she could not help her embarrassment. Rain, hurry up and collect their life force. If you do not collect them within 5 minutes after the Great Lords die, you will lose your chance, Shifeng hurriedly reminded his companion. Thoughtful Rain finally woke from her daze as she retrieved the giant pitch-black egg and collected the life force of the 2 Great Lords. While Thoughtful Rain collected the dissipating life force, Shifeng gathered the loot the 2 bosses had dropped. The 2 Great Lords had dropped a total of 7 pieces of equipment. Although this did not seem much, in the Abyss battlefield this was a considerable harvest. It was easier to find high-ranking monsters in the Abyss battlefield than it was elsewhere. Hence, the drop rate of the top-ranking monsters had been reduced. With the increase in levels, monsters' drop rate for weapons and equipment also decreased. The drops this time are fairly nice. Joy surfaced on Shifeng's face after he finished appraising the items with his omniscient eyes. Among the 7 pieces of equipment, 5 were level 40 fine gold equipment. They had even obtained a piece of level 40 dark gold weapon. Ice Spirit Staff, dark gold rank. Level 40. Attack power plus 1045. Strength plus 51, agility plus 47, intelligence plus 92, vitality plus 87, endurance plus 66. Casting speed increased by 15%. Magic damage increased by 20%. Casting range plus 5. When casting, 20% chance to obtain the power of frost, causing 220% frost damage and reducing target's movement speed by 30% for 5 seconds. Additional passive skill dash. Frost Blessing. Increases ice-type spell effects by 30%. Additional active skill dash. Waterfall. Causes 300% frost damage every second in a radius of 20 yards for 8 seconds, freezing everyone within range for 10 seconds. Effective radius increases by 10 yards every second. Cooldown, 3 hours. Once Shifeng shared the Ice Spirit Staff's information in the team chat, everyone fell speechless. Although the staff's basic attributes are average at best, it increases all of them. Moreover, its active skill is insane. This is the first time I've seen a skill that can cover a radius of 100 yards. Even Stars of Light can't compare to this waterfall. If one uses waterfall on a battlefield, it will devastate the enemy forces. It's a pity though. It would be amazing if it were an epic ranked staff. Large-scale destruction spells were priceless treasures to every guild in God's domain, not to mention waterfall, a spell with so much AoE range. On a battlefield, this spell could easily wipe out several thousands of players. In a battle of 10 or 20,000 players, this spell could decide the victor on its own. The active skill was worth more than an epic item. Shifeng chuckled as he watched everyone admire the Ice Spirit Staff's active skill. Among the 7 pieces of equipment and weapons, the Ice Spirit Staff's active skill was astonishing. However, rather than the Ice Spirit Staff, what surprised Shifeng was the dark gray breastplate. A faint, bloody glow surrounded the armor, giving the equipment a creepy feeling. Sure enough, divine providence is a godly skill. Shifeng could not help but sigh. He then shared the statistics of this item through the team chat. Upon seeing the breastplate's attributes, even the excellently geared core members gasped. Abyss Armor Breastplate. Level 40, Level 60. Equipment requirement, Strength 700. Defense plus 1240, Level 40. Magic Resistance plus 10. Strength plus 42, Endurance plus 40, Agility plus 35. Abyss Set Equipment. Level 40, Level 60. Equipment requirement, Berserker. Set consists of 8 parts: head, shoulders, chest, hands, wrists, waist, legs and feet. Set effect. 2-piece effect. Increases all attributes by 10%. 4-piece effect. All skill damage increased by 20%, attack speed increased by 20%, and movement speed increased by 15%. 6-piece effect. Obtain Abyss Rampage skill. Increases all attributes by 100% and gain immunity to all control effects for 1 minute. Cooldown, 5 hours. 8-piece effect. Obtain Blade of Abyss skill. Transforms equipped weapon into the Blade of Abyss, increasing strength attribute by 300%, attack speed by 100%, and attack range by 10 yards for 15 seconds. Cooldown, 3 hours. What a powerful set. Blackie nearly drooled when he saw read the Abyss set equipment's information. The breastplate's basic attributes were only the equivalent of a dark gold item. However, as one obtained more pieces of the set, their combat power would grow exponentially. If one gathered all 8 pieces, although the set's basic attributes might not compare to epic items, the boost it granted would only be slightly weaker than a set of epic equipment. Of course, it is strong. This set equipment is purely intended to increase violence. Even the Tier 1 set equipment for Berserkers cannot compare to the Abyss set. After reaching Tier 2 at level 50, no Tier 1 set equipment will be able to compete with the Abyss set, Shifeng explained. The Abyss set equipment was the battlefield's representative equipment. Moreover, it was not exclusively for Berserkers. All classes had their own Abyss sets, and their attributes were all specialized for violence. These sets were extremely well suited for PvP. However, the Abyss set's drop rates were extremely low. It was practically impossible to collect all 8 set pieces for a single class. If one could collect 6 pieces of a set, they could increase their prowess in combat far more than with a Tier 1 set equipment. After all, the Tier 1 set equipment only consisted of 5 pieces. If one gathered all 8 pieces of an Abyss set, they would be practically invincible in PvP fights. I wonder if we'll gather a complete set. Aqua Rose was eager to find out. If they gathered all 8 pieces and let either Rampant Blade or Shadow Sword equip the set, the Berserker's abilities would soar, becoming one of the guild's top fighters. Most likely, aside from Shifeng and Fire Dance, nobody in the guild would be able to match them. Alright, rest up. We're going to look for the next Great Lord soon, Shifeng commanded as he stored the equipment. Meanwhile, Immortal Light's members who had watched from a distance, had not recovered from their shock after watching Zero Wing easily defeat the two Great Lords. Their team of 100 had failed to defeat even one Great Lord, yet Zero Wing had taken two down at once with a team of 20. The difference between their guilds was like the difference between heaven and earth. Sindheart suddenly said, "Follow me." Chapter 8:19, City Deed. Chapter 8:19, City Deed. Why are they heading our way? Aqua Rose asked when she saw the members of Immortal Light approach their team. Jokingly she said, "Are they going to try to plunder our loot? If they try to rob us, I won't mind giving them a final send-off." Fire Dance laughed as she unsheathed her 1,000 transformations that hung from her waist. Although the Immortal Light players were relatively strong, she was more than enough to annihilate their team. Moreover, she looked forward to the day someone tried to rob them. Previously, she had found plenty of inspiration during her time in the Dark Arena. This was the perfect opportunity to test some of her ideas. They shouldn't be that stupid. They should be able to tell the difference between our strength and theirs. Shifeng laughed as he watched his teammates prepare for a fight. Sindheart would be one of the 12 sacred elementalists of God's domain in the future. If he lacked the necessary insight to tell the difference in strength between their teams, he would never have been able to make Immortal Light a famous, first-rate guild in the Twin Towers Kingdom. Thank you for your help. If not for you guys holding off those two Great Lords, none of us would be alive right now. Sindheart immediately expressed his gratitude upon arriving before Zero Wing's team, his tone containing a hint of respect. Sindheart's expert companions also stared at Zero Wing's members with reverence. The heavy pressure Fire Dance emitted in particular made them breathless. If these teams fought each other, they would most likely die in an instant. It's nothing. Shifeng shrugged. If you guys are looking for Great Lords, we can help, Sindheart offered. On our way here we encountered quite a number of Great Lords. Only these Great Lords resided in concentrated areas. It's highly likely that you'll attract a second Great Lord while dealing with the first. Saying so, Sindheart sent Shifeng the coordinates of those several Great Lords. Thanks. Shifeng rejoiced when he received the coordinates. Sindheart had given him the coordinates for 7 Great Lords. This would save them a lot of time searching for these bosses. Glad to be of help. Sindheart smiled. I don't believe that you came over here just to give me these Great Lords' locations. What's on your mind? Shifeng asked. He could not help but laugh when he saw Sindheart's hesitation. In the past, even he had looked up to Sindheart. Countless small guilds had tried to gain Immortal Light's favor, yet now, watching this man struggle with his desire to ask for help, Shifeng could not help but sigh. Hearing Shifeng saying so, Sindheart released his tension with a sigh of his own and said, "In truth, aside from thanking you for the help, I wanted to ask something of Zero Wing. Although this may be sudden, I don't have any better options right now." Guild leader, are you really going to ask? One of the guild's upper echelons asked with surprise. If they refuse and news of this leaks, we'll be in big trouble. Do you think we have any other choice? Sindheart grumbled, a deep sense of powerlessness touching his expression. He did not want to do this either. However, he could not think of a better plan. Only after encountering Zero Wing and seeing how powerful the guild was did he find hope. This might very well be their last opportunity to escape their dire situation. The other upper echelons fell silent. Although they wanted to argue their guild leader's decision, they could not bring themselves to do so. However, this had certainly captured Shifeng's interest. He could understand if Sindheart simply wanted to form a connection with Zero Wing. However, for a prideful person like Sindheart to place all his hopes in a stranger, the situation must be severe. Moreover, Shifeng was familiar with Sindheart's personality. He was not someone who would simply bow out of a challenge. Even when Immortal Light had fought a first-rate guild, Sindheart had refused to lower his head. He prioritized bonds and friendship over personal benefits. Otherwise, he would not have risked Immortal Light's extinction just to help an allied guild resist a first-rate guild. God's domain was only a game. Shifeng could not imagine what could cause someone like Sindheart to despair. I wish to sell several plots of land in the Twin Towers Kingdom. I will sell these lands at 90% market price. I'd like to offer them to Zero Wing in exchange for coins or top-tier equipment of the same value, Sindheart finally said after a long moment of silence. Sell land? Shifeng was curious. Since when had Sindhart become a land broker? If they're rubbish lands, Zero Wing is not interested. Please rest assured, the lands are in Snowfield City and have a lot of potential, Sindhart said as he took out several Snowfield City deeds. These are close to the underground arena, the Adventurers Association, the auction house and the War God's Temple. Have you lost your minds? You're actually selling these? Blackie could not help his shock after seeing the deeds. Currently, most of the lands in major NPC cities with potential had been purchased already. It was extremely difficult to buy these lands even if one could afford them. With God's Domain's blazing popularity, more people would join the game in the future. The value of these lands would soar. In less than half a year, these lands would be worth several times their current value. It was especially true for the lands in Twin Towers Kingdom's third-ranking city, Snowfield City. Yet, Immortal Light wanted to sell away these lands at 90% market price no less. This was simply inconceivable. They are indeed good plots of land. However, why are you trying to sell them to Zero Wing? Shifeng asked. The Twin Towers Kingdom and Starmoon Kingdom shared many aspects. Both were medium-sized kingdoms. Although Snowfield City was no match for White River City in terms of status, it was its kingdom's third-ranking city. Many organizations would offer a high price for these lands. Sindhart fell silent for a moment. Shortly after, he sighed and said, "It's not that I don't want to sell them, but nobody is willing to buy them." What? The value of these lands will only increase in the future. Why doesn't anyone want to purchase them? Aquarose asked, slightly surprised. Even the lands in the 20th ranking city in the Twin Towers Kingdom would be highly sought after, much less the valuable lands in the third ranking city. Aquarose had personally ventured to other kingdoms to purchase several plots of land for the Candlelight trading firm, so she understood how popular these lands were. Because none of them wished to earn the ire of the Super Guild King's return, Sindhart said helplessly. When Zero Wing's members heard Sindhart's words, they were dumbfounded. King's Return was a veteran super guild. Even a super first-rate guild like the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was nothing in comparison. Moreover, the King's Return's headquarters was in the Glory Empire, an empire located only a short distance away from Starmoon Kingdom and the Twin Towers Kingdom. Shifeng was similarly shocked by this revelation. A small guild like Immortal Light had actually provoked a super guild like King's Return. No matter how he thought about it, this shouldn't be possible. Moreover, it would be child's play for King's Return to wipe Immortal Light out of existence. Immortal Light was no threat to the super guild at all. Gnashing his teeth, Sindhart stated, "I don't want much for these 5 plots of lands. I only ask for 13,000 gold. Chapter 820 A Group of Lunatics. Guild Leader. Sindhart's asking price shocked the several upper echelons he had with him. These were 5 high-potential, golden lands. "I know what I'm doing," Sindhart barked, having made up his mind. Originally, he had intended to raid Great Lords for some level 40 top-tier equipment and sell the items. However, they were not strong enough to take down level 40-plus Great Lords. The only option they had left to earn a large sum of coins quickly was to sell these 5 plots of land. However, they could not sell the land to anyone in the Twin Towers Kingdom. King's Return had already declared their stance in the Twin Towers Kingdom, and nobody was willing to provoke the Super Guild. However, with Zero Wing strength, even a super first-rate guild like the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had been forced to back down. Hence, Zero Wing should not fear King's Return at all. Moreover, only a large guild like Zero Wing had the financial strength to spend 13,000 gold. Zero Wing occupied a treasured land like the Stone Forest town. The magic crystals and coins the town generated could tempt even first-rate guilds. Although there were guilds in their kingdom that did not fear King's Return, these guilds would need a relatively long time to gather the required money. Unfortunately, Sindhart could not afford to wait. 13,000 gold? Shifeng had never expected Sindhart to sell these lands for so little. Based on the current market, these lands were roughly worth 20,000 gold. Even at that price, many people would fight over them. Now, however, Sindhart wanted to sell them for 13,000 gold. Shifeng could profit greatly if he bought them. Not to mention, Starmoon Kingdom and the Twin Towers Kingdom were neighbors. These lands could benefit Zero Wing when it expanded towards the Twin Towers Kingdom. It seems that Sindhart has been backed into a corner. Shifeng could more or less understand Sindhart's current predicament after seeing the man's anxiety. In Shifeng's previous life, however, Immortal Light had never ceased to exist. This showed that King's Return had not wiped out Immortal Light in the past. Moreover, he had never heard of King's Return attacking Immortal Light. Immortal Light had most likely relied on itself to solve this problem. Alright, we'll buy these 5 plots of land. Shifeng nodded. Only we'll need some time to prepare such a large sum. Why don't we conduct the trade in 3 days? 3 days. Sindhart pondered for a moment. Quickly, his tense expression relaxed as he responded, "Thank you. I'll visit Zero Wing personally." Following which, Sindhart led his guild members away from South Lake City. "Guild leader, are we really going to oppose King's Return?" Aqua Rose asked Shifeng through a private message. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion could not compare to King's Return. Moreover, Glory Empire was not far from Starmoon Kingdom. Once mounts were available in God's domain, the Super Guild's threat to Zero Wing would not be a laughing matter. "Don't worry. We're just conducting business. If we stop doing business just because a Super Guild demanded it, we might as well give up competing for dominance over God's domain," Shifeng said, shaking his head. "Moreover, this isn't a major issue. If King's Return were truly angry, it would have annihilated Immortal Light already. If the Super Guild struck, Immortal Light would have no power to resist. Sindhart had helped him in the past. Now he was only returning the favor. Moreover, he could make a huge profit with this trade and secure Sindhart's gratitude. If Sindhart owed him a debt, he might be able to poach Sindhart into Zero Wing in the future. Why wouldn't he accept such an offer? Indeed. If we can obtain those 5 plots of land, the Candlelight Trading Firm can start its development in the Twin Towers Kingdom." Aqua Rose agreed with Shifeng's reason. Zero Wing was no longer the weak, little guild it had been. If they cowered from such a small issue, developing the guild in the future would be a problem. If King's Return truly wanted to deal with Zero Wing, it would have to consider its options carefully. The Super Guild was not powerful enough to annihilate Zero Wing in Starmoon Kingdom. Zero Wing really is amazing. They're not even afraid of King's Return? Deathwind had never imagined that Shifeng would agree to Sindhart's offer so decisively. For a moment he was at a loss for words. The Wind God's Spear was already impressive for standing up against the first-rate guilds in the Dark Knight Empire. However, Zero Wing was far more amazing. The guild was not even afraid of the titans of the virtual gaming world. I wonder when the Wind God's Spear will conduct itself like Zero Wing? Deathwind's mind wandered. Maybe joining a guild like Zero Wing isn't a bad idea. At this moment, Autumn Goose envied Thoughtful Rain and Blue Bamboo. After Immortal Light departed, Shifeng led the team on a hunt for more Great Lords. With the coordinates Sindhart had provided, the team quickly cleared a path towards these Great Lords. The Great Lords behind city walls were no challenge for Zero Wing's core members. The only issue they encountered was their Berserk skills cooldowns. Fortunately, however, not every Great Lord required their Berserk skills. For 2 days, Shifeng and the others spent their time either killing Great Lords or clearing a path through random monsters towards Great Lords. Time passed leisurely as they learned more about each other. Over these 2 days, their experience bars had risen rapidly due to the large mobs of monsters they killed. Not only had Shifeng reached level 40, but Aqua Rose and the others had also hit level 40. This is the last one. Thoughtful Rain looked at the fallen Great Lord as she collected her 20th Great Lord's life force. "Oh, not bad. We actually got another Abyss set piece," Shifeng said after appraising the 3 pieces of equipment he had picked up. Smiling, he said, "Now we only need 2 more to complete the Abyss set for Berserkers." Although he had used Divine Providence for every Great Lord they had killed during the past 2 days, the Abyss set equipment's drop rate was simply too low. Even with his boosted luck attribute, a limited number of pieces had dropped. Fortunately, the Great Lords in South Lake City only seemed to drop the Abyss set for Berserkers. Otherwise they would not have gathered 6 pieces. Our job is finally done here. Autumn Goose released a sigh of relief after watching Thoughtful Rain collect the final life force. If not for Zero Wing's help, they would never have killed 20 level 40 Great Lords in 3 days. In the end, the level 100 Tier 3 NPC would have hunted them down until they quit God's domain. However, after realizing that they had completed their quest, Autumn Goose was slightly disappointed. While grinding monsters and raiding bosses with Shifeng and his team, not only had they enjoyed chatting with each other, but she had also learned several techniques from Zero Wing's core members. Now that their quest was complete, they would have to go their separate ways, and she could not help her slight reluctance. "Leader, since we have completed the quest, it's time to deal with the other issue, right? Fire Dance asked as she turned to the gigantic bone dragon in the sky, a glint of excitement flashing in her eyes. The rest of the team laughed at Fire Dance's jubilance. It was definitely not their style to leave a Grand Lord alone. To avoid any unnecessary risks, they had avoided challenging the Frost Bone Dragon. Now that they had finished their main objective, however, they had to kill the Grand Lord. That's a level 45 Grand Lord you're talking about. Autumn Goose could not believe that these members from Zero Wing actually considered raiding the dragon. They were insane. How can we possibly win against that with so few people? It might have been impossible before, but it is definitely possible now, Shifeng said, laughing. He then retrieved a dark gold flute from his bag. Complex runes decorated the flute, and it emitted a faint pressure. Chapter 821 Demonic Flame Tiger. Is it really possible? Autumn Goose muttered doubtfully. Chills crawled down her spine despite the Frost Bone Dragon being so far away, her instincts constantly warning her of the danger. Every time the bone dragon flapped its massive wings, the sounds of explosions rang through the air. Even a fool could see the difference between the Grand Lord and a mere Great Lord. The two were on entirely different levels. Shifeng understood this fact as well. The Frost Bone Dragon was South Lake City's final boss. Of course, it wouldn't be an easy opponent. Fortunately, however, he had two powerful trump cards. They still had a chance of victory. Moreover, it wouldn't be a major issue if they died. At worst, they would be teleported out of the Abyss battlefield. They would not suffer the usual death penalties. Following which, Shifeng played the dark gold flute, the sweet sound echoing throughout South Lake City. Roar! With a roar, a golden magic array appeared before Shifeng. Suddenly, a massive black tiger leaped out of the array. The massive tiger stood over 4 meters tall. Black flames covered its razor-sharp claws, exquisite black armor wrapped around its body. Just by standing there, the tiger's flames increased the surrounding temperature significantly. The ground beneath its feet melted under the scorching heat. The tiger was too hot to approach. What's that? Everyone was stunned by the sudden appearance of the black, flaming beast. It's a mount, of course. Shifeng walked up to the giant tiger and rubbed the soft fur on its head. He was quite satisfied with his mount. Demonic Flame Tiger, Dark Gold Mount. Level 40. HP 1, 020, 000/1, 020, 000. In the past, the best mount Shifeng had ridden was only fine gold rank. In this life, however, he had obtained a dark gold mount after killing Noya, a guardian boss in the Dark Denver. Mounts were extremely useful to players in field battles, especially a dark gold mount. Even a bronze mount already possessed certain combat capabilities, assisting players in battle. After reaching dark gold rank, the mount was the equivalent of a chieftain of the same level. Although a chieftain might not be anything to a top-tier expert, a dark gold mount's true power did not lie in its damage-dealing abilities. Such a thing was only useful to ordinary players. The true value of a dark gold mount lay in its support skills. Having a dark gold mount was the equivalent of having a player with support skills by one's side. Sure enough, a dark gold mount's skills are very powerful. Shifeng was slightly surprised after he examined the Demonic Flame Tiger's skill menu. A level 40 fine gold mount only had 2 support skills. One was single target skill while the other was an AoE skill. However, a level 40 dark gold mount had 3 support skills, with one being a single target skill and the other 2 being AoE skills. Synergy, passive skill. While within 100 yards of the Demonic Flame Tiger, all attributes of owner increase by 10%. Battle Roar. The Demonic Flame Tiger releases a deafening roar. All allies within 20 yards experience a 20% damage increase, movement speed increased by 20%, and attack speed increased by 30% for 10 minutes. Cooldown, 30 minutes. Dark Blessing. All allies within 20 yards gain 100 points of magic resistance, 20% damage reduction, and all attributes increased by 10% for 30 minutes. Cooldown, 10 hours. These 3 skills alone could raise the strength of the entire team by a huge margin. This was the value of dark gold mounts. A mount. Everyone's jaws dropped when they heard Shifeng's explanation. This can't be true, right? The Demonic Flame Tiger before them looked absolutely stunning. Moreover, they felt a heavy pressure from it. Based on its HP, it should be at least as powerful as a chieftain. A monster like the demonic flame tiger could even serve as the boss in a party dungeon, yet such a powerful monster was actually a mount. This shattered any knowledge they had about mounts. What rank is this mount? Secret silver? Fine gold? Everyone nearly drooled as they stared at the demonic flame tiger. With its imposing might and its majestic appearance, the demonic tiger would be the center of attention regardless of where it was. It's just dark gold rank, Shifeng said as he tapped the demonic flame tiger's front paw. The demonic tiger obediently bent down before Shifeng, its dignified behavior vanishing. Shifeng's team members shot him a disdainful glare. It's just dark gold rank? Even though they had already reached level 40, none of them even had a common mount. They just hoped to obtain a bronze or mysterious iron mount. They wouldn't even dare dream of owning a secret silver mount, let alone a fine gold mount. They had never even expected to see a dark gold mount. After we leave the battlefield, I must find my own dark gold mount to show off, Blackie declared as he drooled over the demonic flame tiger that was the size of a small house. He could not help but fantasize about riding his own demonic tiger down White River City streets. He would be the object of everyone's envy. Just the thought gave him chills. The other team members nodded in agreement. The horses one could buy in cities were garbage compared to the demonic flame tiger. Only a mount like the demonic flame tiger could be considered a real mount. This is not the time for this. Everyone head to your appointed locations. Aqua, cast Song of Sprites on me, Shifeng commanded. The epic ranked staff song of Beatrice he had previously given Aqua Rose had a very powerful skill, the Song of Sprites. It could amplify the effects of a specific spell. When used on large-scale destruction spells and summoning skills, this skill was incredibly powerful. Shifeng had long since used up his magic amplification scroll. The Song of Sprites was the perfect skill to replace it. Following which Shifeng summoned the Demon Gate. Aqua Rose used Song of Sprites on Shifeng, instantly buffing the demon summoning by 300%. In the next moment, a Tier 3 battle demon wielding a two-handed sword in one hand emerged from the Demon Gate. Battle Demon. Level 55. HP 14, 000, 000/14, 000, It was a success. Seeing the Tier 3 battle demon step away from the Demon Gate, Shifeng used the Bible of Darkness's ability to rob the battle demon of its will, turning it into a puppet. Is this Yi Feng and these core members' true strength? The instant the battle demon appeared, Autumn Goose, Thoughtful Rain, and the others were stunned. A Tier 3 demon was the equivalent of a Great Lord-ranked monster. It was also level 55. That monster could kill them instantly. Just how powerful is Zero Wing? Autumn Goose and the others struggled with their shock. Only now did they finally understand why Zero Wing's members had been so calm against all of those great lords. They even wanted to take on the Frostbone Dragon. With such a powerful summon monster, even with so few members, it was not entirely impossible to defeat the level 45 Grand Lord. Chapter 822 Adjudicator. Glory Empire, Imperial Capital Light City. As the main headquarters of the Super Guild Kings return, Light City's prosperity surpassed even that of the Black Dragon Empire's imperial capital. The player population alone exceeded the capital's by 15 million. The player population wasn't the only indicator of Light City's prosperity, players' levels also displayed the city's success. Currently, God's Domain's mainstream players were around level 32, while some of the more powerful elite players had reached level 35. However, if one wandered the streets of Light City, they would easily spot level 35 elite players. From time to time, one would also notice level 36 or level 37 independent players. The capital cities of various kingdoms and ordinary empires could not hold a candle to Light City. The reason behind the high levels of Light City's players was none other than the Super Guild King's return. Super Guilds had very long histories in the virtual gaming world. Normally, these Super Guilds had their own means of nurturing experts, and they had no need to recruit powerful players from elsewhere. Moreover, the experts who enjoyed Super Guild's nurturing would always rank as the top rookies of the year in the virtual gaming world, instantly becoming well-known experts. Their personal value would soar by several times. Countless players held this long-cherished dream of gaining overnight fame and riches. Hence, every year swarms of young players would take part in the internal exam of Super Guilds, fighting to gain membership and participate in the guild's expert training programs. Aside from nurturing its own experts from scratch, King's Return, a super guild that had already existed for a long time, did recruit some experts from elsewhere as well. These experts would become internal members and receive a multitude of resources. If any of these experts became one of the year's top newcomers, they might even earn the privilege of becoming one of the guild's upper echelons. If that happened, they would not have to worry about a lack of money for the rest of their lives. Aqua Rose and Purple Eye were both such players. However, they had chosen their own paths. Hence, after finishing their training and paying a certain price, they left their super guild. Meanwhile, King's Return was once again recruiting experts. Hence, many players throughout God's domain had come to Light City, hoping to join King's Return. There was no lack of expert players among the crowd. Currently, many players were lined up inside King's Return's guild residence, giving the place a lively atmosphere. However, when two men entered the guild residence's main hall, the room fell silent, every gaze shifting towards these two people. Of these two, one was a middle-aged man wearing black armor. He also carried a great sword with inscribed runes, a chill radiating from the weapon. This man was a level 38 berserker. A handsome younger man stood beside the berserker with an unruly temperament. The young man carried a staff made of sapphire crystal and wore a set of gray mage robes. Faint arcs of gray electricity surrounded his body. This man was a level 38 elementalist. Even in the entire Glory Empire, these people's level could rank at the very top. Isn't that the Thunder Sword, Broken City? I actually get to meet one of King's Return's upper echelons. I'm so lucky today. The person beside Broken City seems to be the newly promoted Adjudicator of King's Return, Hell Fiend. I never thought that he would be so handsome. I wonder if he has a girlfriend? Immediately, the various players in the main hall fell into heated discussions among themselves, reverence filling their eyes as they gazed at the two latest arrivals. Every one of these players dreamed of joining the ranks of King's Return's upper echelons or obtaining the title of the guild's Adjudicator one day. Hell Fiend, in particular, had obtained the position of King's Return's Adjudicator at such a young age. This had been unheard of in the Super Guild's long history. Generally, experts could become an Adjudicator only after many years of arduous training. The title should be out of the reach of a rookie like Hell Fiend, yet the youth had managed to obtain it. Under the crowd's watchful eye, Broken City and Hell Fiend walked into a small meeting room. A man in a black cloak had been waiting in the meeting room for quite some time. When this man noticed the two people enter the room, he immediately stood to welcome them. Hand me the files and items. Also, give me a summary of the situation, Broken City commanded gruffly. Understood, the cloaked man nodded. He then handed over a box and a folder before saying, originally, the plan had proceeded quite smoothly. However, Sindhart encountered Zero Wing's upper echelons. Moreover, Zero Wing's people agreed to Sindhart's offer, and they are willing to purchase the 5 plots of land. Sindhart will be to Zero Wing to complete the trade today. Do those people from Zero Wing not know about our warning? Hellfiend asked coldly, frowning. Sindhart had taken the initiative to reveal the situation to them. However, Zero Wing agreed to the purchase on the spot as if King's Return means nothing to them, the cloaked man reported anxiously, sweat beading on his forehead as he felt the weight of Hellfiend's gaze. Zero Wing is taking us too lightly. Rage flashed in Hellfiend's eyes as he slammed his staff into the ground, cracking it. There is no reason to be anxious. They have yet to conduct the trade, so we still have time to do something about it. I'll have someone send Zero Wing's guild leader a light warning. I believe Zero Wing will make the right choice, Broken City said, chuckling. If Zero Wing truly refuses to listen, it won't be too late for us to act. I understand, Uncle Broken, Hellfiend said as he suppressed the rage in his heart. To him, this matter was of utmost importance. If Zero Wing dared to interfere, he did not mind annihilating the upstart guild. Elsewhere, Shifeng directed his team's battle preparations. Fire, Flying, Miner, lure the surrounding monsters to us. Rain, get ready to use Waterfall. Blackie, get ready to use Stars of Light. After Shifeng summoned the Tier 3 battle demon, he did not rush to take on the Frostbone Dragon. A level 45 Grand Lord was simply too powerful for current players. Furthermore, the slightest mistake while the team fought inside a monster next could result in a team wipe. Clearing the surrounding monsters was a must, particularly when facing a guardian boss like the Frostbone Dragon. All guardian bosses possessed a similar ability, Life Devour. If a team did not respond to this passive skill appropriately, it would not matter how many players charged at a guardian boss. Everyone would simply charge towards their graves. Life Devour allowed guardian bosses to absorb all life force within a radius of 1,000 yards. Be they players or monsters, all those in range would lose 1% of their HPs every 3 seconds. Meanwhile, the guardian boss would absorb this HP. Hence, when going up against a guardian boss, too many people was not always a good thing. Guardian bosses usually had very high HP. Chances were high that players could not even deal enough damage to these bosses to overcome their innate battle recovery. Moreover, when fighting a Grand Lord like the Frostbone Dragon, players' stamina consumption rate would be very high. They could not afford to fight a battle of attrition against such bosses. In the end, players would die from exhaustion. Finally, after over an hour, Shifeng's team managed to clear all of the monsters within the Frostbone Dragon's range of activity. Move out. Following which, Shifeng directed the Battle Demon to charge at the Frostbone Dragon. He also activated the demonic Flame Tiger's Battle Roar and Dark Blessing. Immediately, the entire team's attributes and magic resistance rose by a large margin. Chapter 823, Monster Level Battle. Groar. When the Battle Demon was within 200 yards of the boss, the Frostbone Dragon sensed the demon's presence. As it released a furious roar, the Grand Lord flapped its massive bone wings. The generated gust prevented the Battle Demon from approaching. Before the wind came to an end, the Frostbone Dragon stretched open its jaws. Suddenly, a storm broke out, covering a 200-yard radius, and a seemingly endless amount of mana gathered in the Bone Dragon's mouth. Damn it, it's using dragon breath. Realizing what he was seeing, Shifeng hurriedly shouted, "Everyone, get away from the Bone Dragon's front." Shifeng's command confused Aqua Rose and the others. They were currently over 300 yards away from the Grand Lord. At such a distance, the Bone Dragon's attack should not be a threat. However, seeing at Shifeng's anxious expression, the Zero-Wing team did not dare to be careless as they rushed to the sides. Due to Battle Roar and Dark Blessing, everyone's attributes had received a significant boost. Their movement speeds had also increased massively. In the end, they managed to move just as the mana in the Grand Lord's mouth reached a critical level. Before the team could relax, however, they suddenly felt a chill from behind them, and they could not help their shivers. Instantly, a beam of white light devoured the buildings behind them. How is this possible? Aqua Rose could not believe her eyes. The 600-yard stretch before the Frostbone Dragon had transformed into a frozen tundra. Had they not dodged the breath attack in time, they would have lost their lives. How can a Grand Lord be so powerful? The crowd gasped collectively. With such a wide and long-ranged AoE attack, even an army of 10,000 players would die instantly. Alright, snap out of it. Let the Battle Demon pin the Frostbone Dragon down. Everyone else, attack from the dragon's sides. Absolutely do not stand in front of it, Shifeng immediately commanded, not finding the Grand Lord's powerful attack one bit surprising. The Frostbone Dragon ruled over a city. Zerg tactics would never be enough for players to kill it. If not for his ability to summon a Tier 3 demon, he would not risk everyone's lives by provoking such a boss. Although the Frostbone Dragon was more powerful than their team, it was only a level 45 Grand Lord. However, the Tier 3 demon he had summoned was level 55. The difference of 10 levels could, mostly, make up for the difference in rank. Even if he could not exert the Tier 3 demon's full strength, he could use it to pin the boss down. As the breath attack ended, the Battle Demon, which Shifeng had previously moved out of the breath attack's range, arrived before the Grand Lord and used a Tier 3 skill. Round Flash. Countless flashes of light appeared around the Bone Dragon's skull until the monster's head was hidden behind a dazzling, silver glow. Minus 592,018. The Frostbone Dragon released a pained cry as its body fell to the ground abruptly, flattening the buildings beneath it. The impact caused South Lake City to tremble. As for Autumn Goose and the others, who had begun their charge towards the Frostbone Dragon, they were momentarily stunned. With a single hit, the Tier 3 demon demolished a small but visible chunk of the Frostbone Dragon's HP. This one attack was most likely more powerful than the combined attacks of a player army of thousands. Moreover, this was the first time she had ever seen Tier 3 beings fight against each other. Usually she only saw players tackle monsters. The shock of watching two monsters face each other was intense. This scene allowed them to realize just how weak players were. Compared to this great battle, Their previous battles were practically child's play. Before the Frost Bone Dragon, which towered over 100 meters tall, any player would seem insignificant. The mental pressure the Grand Lord exerted stole their breath. Don't stop. We've entered its frost domain. As long as we remain inside this domain, our stamina will decrease rapidly. Even if we don't move, our stamina will decrease. We need to hurry and get rid of the Bone Dragon before our stamina runs out. Shi Feng reminded his team as he glanced at Autumn Goose, Thoughtful Rain, and the others who had stopped moving due to shock. Notify me immediately if any of you run out of stamina during the battle. Yes. Everyone nodded as they regained their focus. Against such a boss, Aqua Rose and the other core members of Zero Wing fared relatively well. After all, they had raided a Grand Lord before. Only, the Frost Bone Dragon was significantly more powerful than that Grand Lord. However, this was the first time Autumn Goose, Death Wind, Gunfire, Thoughtful Rain, and Blue Bamboo had faced a Grand Lord. Fighting against such an oppressive pressure and bathing in such frigid killing intent, even moving became a struggle for them. It would be a miracle if they could even exert 50% or 60% of their usual strength. How can a Grand Lord be so terrifying? Autumn Goose's heart pounded as she watched the Bone Dragon's mountain-like body. She then looked at Fire Dance and the others, who appeared almost unfazed and were still charging towards the Grand Lord, and she smiled bitterly. Back in the Wind God's Spear, she had always pursued adventure and excitement. However, compared to the Frost Bone Dragon, those adventures had been a walk in the park. This Grand Lord's might was overpowering enough that she felt incredibly powerless. In contrast, despite such an oppressive pressure, Zero Wing's members did not show any signs of slowing. With this, one could easily tell that Zero Wing's members had long since become accustomed to such battles. For some reason, a random thought invoked a strange feeling within Autumn Goose. This was what she has searched for all this time. While Autumn Goose was caught up in her daze, the Frost Bone Dragon slammed its massive claws down onto the battle demon. Unable to dodge the attack in time, Shi Feng could only direct the battle demon to defend itself with its weapon. Boom. Minus 95,164. The ground beneath the battle demon's feet shattered as the demon became embedded into the ground. The surrounding land shook from the impact, a deep fissure forming and spreading towards Autumn Goose. Autumn Goose was momentarily taken aback. Compared to the Frost Bone Dragon's destructive power, the great lords they had defeated earlier were nothing more than harmless kittens. However, Autumn Goose still reacted. Although her movements were sluggish due to the Guardian Boss's pressure, she had managed to pull her weapon up before her. Pum. The incoming shockwave struck and threw Autumn Goose, a damage of minus 867 appearing above her head. A gasp tore through the watching players. Despite standing so far away, Autumn Goose still received nearly minus 900 damage after defending herself successfully. If she had failed to lift her weapon in time, she probably would have lost over 4,000 HP in an instant. As for the Frost Bone Dragon's claws, even Kola might die instantly if he received a direct hit. Even after activating his Berserk skill and all of his life-saving skills, he would only survive one attack at most. Fortunately, however, they had a Tier 3 demon to take the Bone Dragon's hits for them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any chance of surviving against the Grand Lord. Shi Feng simply smiled at everyone's reaction. Ordinary bosses could not compare to a Guardian boss. Furthermore, the Frost Bone Dragon was a member of the dragon race. It was much stronger than ordinary bosses. Even if Kola reached level 45, he could not tank this boss by himself. At the very least, they needed 3 MTs of equal caliber to handle the Frost Bone Dragon. This should be far enough. Shi Feng arrived beside the Bone Dragon and raised the Abyssal Blade. He swung the magic weapon down on the Grand Lord. Abyssal Curse. Chapter 824, Super Large-Scale Destruction Spell. Seal. Shi Feng shouted low. Suddenly, a massive, black magic array appeared beneath the Frost Bone Dragon's feet. Even with its gigantic body, the magic array enveloped the Grand Lord, and an endless stream of black fog penetrated the Bone Dragon's body, slowly corroding it. Roar. The Frost Bone Dragon struggled, trying to break free from the array's bindings, but no matter how hard it fought, it could not expel the black fog from its body. Everyone on the team immediately used their most powerful skills against the Frost Bone Dragon. Lifting his spear, Gunfire leaped into the air and used Beheaded. Pum. Although the Frost Bone Dragon had received the attack without any resistance, when Gunfire's attack struck the Grand Lord's white bone, it felt as if he had just hit a solid wall. Not only did the attack fail to cause any external damage, but the resulting vibration also inflicted pain to his own hand. His attack had only caused slightly over -700 damage. What kind of defense is this? Horror filled Autumn Goose as she stared at the damage. No matter what was said or done, Gunfire was one of the top-ranking experts in the Wind God's Spear. He was very well equipped. Even against all those great lords prior to this fight, his beheaded skill always dealt around -2000 damage. Now, however, even after receiving a significant boost to his attributes, his beheaded had only caused around -700 damage. The Frost Bone Dragon's defense had to be more than double that of the previous Great Lords. Meanwhile, the Frost Bone Dragon had 64 million HP. With its battle recovery alone, it could regenerate 640,000 HP every second. Not to mention, since the battle had begun, the Grand Lord had been absorbing 1% of their HP every 3 seconds. With such a powerful recovery, even 100 continuously attacking Gunfires would barely scratch the Frost Bone Dragon. They would be no threat to the Grand Lord at all. Fire Dance then jumped up from the Frost Bone Dragon's right, landing on the Grand Lord's spine, instantly executing Absolute Strike. However, 1000 Transformations, which was even sharper than the Sacred Sword Killing Ray, cut at the pearly white bone, the short sword only dug 3 centimeters deep into the bone before coming to a halt. -14,489. Why is there such a huge difference in defense? Fire Dance frowned. Absolute Strike was her most powerful burst skill, yet even after a critical hit, the skill only dealt over -10,000 damage. At this rate, they would die from exhaustion before they could kill the Frost Bone Dragon. If this was already the case for Fire Dance, there was no need to mention how little the others could do against the Frost Bone Dragon. Everyone's most powerful skills had only managed to deal around -4,000 damage to the Grand Lord. Only after including Shurfeng's damage did the team barely deal enough to overcome the Frost Bone Dragon's recovery. At this rate, they would need to fight for 5 or 6 hours to kill the Grand Lord. Unfortunately, it would be a miracle if everyone's stamina lasted for 10 minutes. As for the Battle Demon, although it was very strong, the Frost Bone Dragon easily blocked the majority of its attacks. It had barely any opportunities to damage the Grand Lord. 2 seconds after Shurfeng activated Abyssal Curse, the Frost Bone Dragon's wings shuddered as it broke free from the magic array. Immediately, it swiped its tail at the Battle Demon, launching a more violent attack than before. In the next moment, an afterimage briefly appeared. Before the Battle Demon under Shurfeng's control could react, the Bone Dragon had sent it flying. Everyone had expected the Battle Demon to suffer an intense amount of damage. However, the Battle Demon only lost around 70,000 HP, that was even less than the damage it had received before. The Bone Dragon's attributes have decreased, Aqua Rose stated as she looked at the Frost Bone Dragon's HP. Currently, the Grand Lord only had a maximum HP of 57,600,000. Its attributes had been decreased by 10%. The players felt joy bloom in their chests. Their will to fight soared. Even to ordinary players, a 10% attribute drop would significantly affect their combat power, much less for a guardian boss like the Frost Bone Dragon. Everyone activate your Berserk skills. Use this opportunity to slay this boss. Shurfeng hurriedly reminded. Abyssal Curse could reduce the Frost Bone Dragon's attributes for 10 minutes, so if they could not finish the Grand Lord off in these 10 minutes it would become much harder to defeat later. They needed to exert all of their strength now. Following Shurfeng's command, everyone activated their Berserk skills at full strength. As for Shurfeng, he activated Heavenly Dragon's Power. Among the several Berserk skills Shurfeng had, Dragon's Power increased his strength attribute the most. With the Tier 3 Battle Demon acting as a meat shield, Shurfeng used Silent Steps and appeared directly behind the Frost Bone Dragon. Phantom Kill. Flame Burst. Shurfeng and his doppelganger released a series of 30 dazzling explosions on the Bone Dragon's weakened ribcage. -20,484. -28,497. -41,054. -57,149. 30 consecutive hits struck the Frost Bone Dragon, instantly stealing a small chunk of the Grand Lord's HP. Aqua Rose used Song of Sprites and cast the Tier 1 spell Soul Cloud. In the next moment, Several dozen damages appeared above the Frost Bone Dragon's head, each one devouring over 1000 HP. In addition, Aqua Rose summoned 3 blue fire crows and 3 forest sprites. Although each summoned creature could only deal around -1000 damage, with the 6 attacking together, they instantly destroyed over 6000 of the Grand Lord's HP. In terms of damage output, Aqua Rose was only inferior to Shurfeng and Fire Dance. Besides, the blue fire crows were slightly different from the forest sprites. The blue fire crows possessed the growth skill. As time passed, they would increase in rank. From elite monsters, the blue fire crow could grow to become lords. At that point, Aqua Rose's damage could even surpass Fire Dance's. Seconds and minutes passed quickly. Under Shurfeng and his team's all-out assault, the Frost Bone Dragon's HP quickly fell to 30%. Finally, the Tier 3 Battle Demon was in an extremely miserable state. It currently had less than 20% of its HP remaining. Foolish humans, feel the wrath of the abyss, the Frost Bone Dragon bellowed as it suddenly flapped its wings. Shio. The Frost Bone Dragon instantly appeared above South Lake City. In the next moment, an endless amount of elemental mana surged towards the Frost Bone Dragon's body from all directions. At the same time, a deep blue twofold magic array appeared above South Lake City as well, enveloping the entire space above the city. The violent power radiating from the magic array threw everyone to the ground as if the end of the world had arrived. It's over? How does the Bone Dragon know such a spell? Shock filled Aqua Rose's eyes as she stared at the magic array above South Lake City. With her understanding of magic arrays, she knew that they had absolutely no chance of defending against the Frost Bone Dragon's spell. They could only wait for death to claim their lives. With spells like this, how can anybody defeat the Frost Bone Dragon? The other team members felt similarly powerless as they watched. It was technically not impossible to deal with a super large-scale destruction spell like this. However, with the magic array covering the entire South Lake City, how could they escape the spell's range in time? Haha. Go on. Flay. Let's see if you can escape the wrath of the abyss. The Frost Bone Dragon laughed. I've been waiting for this. Shurfeng's lips curled into a smile. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Immediately he activated Wind Rider. He then switched the aura of wind to the aura of time before looking at Aqua Rose, saying, "Use Song of Sprites on me." It had already been 5 minutes since Aqua Rose last used Song of Sprites. The skill's cooldown should have ended. Although Aqua Rose did not understand what Shurfeng intended to do, she cast Song of Sprites on him. Shurfeng then flew towards the Frost Bone Dragon, which was still in the process of gathering and condensing mana. Absolute Time. This was Shurfeng's final trump card against the Frost Bone Dragon. If he could not interrupt the Frost Bone Dragon's abyssal wrath, a super large-scale destruction spell, trying to deal with the Grand Lord would be sheer lunacy. Immediately, with the Frost Bone Dragon as the center, the space within a radius of 300 yards froze. All mana in the area scattered and vanished immediately. No. Due to the sudden loss of mana, the Frost Bone Dragon released a pained cry as it suffered a backlash from its spell. Its massive body, which had been over 100 meters in height, suddenly shrunk to only 60 meters or so. Its attributes also fell by 40% as it entered a weakened state for 3 minutes. The Frost Bone Dragon's body then crashed to the ground. With its combat power greatly reduced, how could the Frost Bone Dragon be a challenge for the team from Zero Wing? Even without the Tier 3 Battle Demon, the Frost Bone Dragon was no longer a threat. At this time, Shurfeng activated the power of darkness, his attributes soaring once more. He then began a rampant assault on the Grand Lord. When the Frost Bone Dragon had less than 500,000 HP remaining, Shurfeng activated Divine Providence before using Flame Burst on the Grand Lord, destroying the Grand Lord's final strand of HP. The instant the Frost Bone Dragon died, everyone heard the sound of a system notification. Chapter 825, Loot of a Grand Lord. It's finally dead. They could not help but breathe out a sigh of relief when they saw the Frost Bone Dragon falling to the ground, the Grand Lord's HP thoroughly depleted. As the Frost Bone Dragon fell to the ground, everyone's experience bars had also abruptly increased by a large margin. So much EXP. A golden glow covered Autumn Goose, Death Wind, Gunfire, Thoughtful Rain, and Blue Bamboo as all 5 of them leveled up from level 38 to level 39, expressions of shock appearing on their faces. Even the combined EXP they gained from killing the 20 Great Lords from before could not compete against the EXP provided by a single Frostbone Dragon. While everyone was celebrating over their success in killing the Frostbone Dragon, a system announcement suddenly surprised everyone. System announcement: congratulations! You have killed the Guardian Boss Frostbone Dragon. War God's Temple Reputation plus 20 points. Rewarding 5 basic medals of honor. Wow! We've hit the jackpot this time. We got 5 basic medals of honor. Autumn Goose and the others were similarly stunned by the situation. They never imagined that there would be such great rewards for killing the Frostbone Dragon. They had heard that many large guilds had organized massive expeditions to conquer towns. Meanwhile, aside from earning a large amount of honor points, another important reason these guilds were organizing such expeditions was to increase their reputation with the War God's Temple, as well as obtain basic medals of honor. The higher one's War God's Temple reputation was, the more discounts one could obtain when exchanging for items using honor points. At the same time, after one's reputation with the temple reached a certain level, they could also exchange for higher-ranking items. The high-ranking items available for exchange would tempt even top-tier expert players, much less ordinary expert players. For example, battlefield mounts, rare skills, high-ranking rare potions, and many other items could not be found on the market. Although a battlefield mount was only useful in the Abyss battlefield, the quality of the mount itself was very high. Players could exchange for a bronze mount right from the onset. As one's War God's Temple reputation increased, one could even exchange for a dark gold mount. These mounts could increase a player's combat power in the Abyss battlefield significantly. Not to mention there were also all sorts of rare skills. However, aside from needing a large amount of honor points, these high-ranking items also required one other thing for which to exchange. And that item was the basic medal of honor. Exchanging for a single bronze battlefield mount required 20 basic medals of honor and 30,000 honor points. Without basic medals of honor, even with all the honor points in the world, one would not be able to exchange for items that were truly useful to players. However, it was extremely difficult to obtain a basic medal of honor. From the knowledge they gained through the research done over the past few days, for players who participated in capturing a town there was only a single basic medal of honor awarded. Now each of them had obtained 5 medals. That was equivalent to capturing 5 towns. If one wanted to exchange for a bronze mount, they'd need to capture a total of 20 towns. Capturing a town was easier said than done. Unlike the outside world, once players died in the Abyss battlefield, they had to wait until the next day to enter the battlefield again. Hence, one's life was essential in the Abyss battlefield. To avoid death, players would usually act carefully and spend a long time raiding a single town. However, there were currently no bronze mounts being sold on the market at all. Only a single common mount was for sale, which cost 40 gold. Even if someone were selling a bronze mount, it would cost several hundred gold at the very least. How could ordinary players possibly afford to purchase one? Consequently, if one wanted to experience riding a bronze mount, this was the fastest method to do so. In the Abyss battlefield mounts were slightly more powerful than normal mounts. Not only were they faster, but their combat power was also higher by a single rank. Just a fine gold battlefield mount could already rival a chieftain of the same level, while dark gold battlefield mounts could rival a lord of the same level. With such a mount, players could obtain honor points in the Abyss battlefield more easily in the future. While everyone was feeling ecstatic over their unexpected harvest, Shifeng had appraised all the items dropped by the Frostbone Dragon. Although the Frostbone Dragon had only dropped 5 items, every piece was either a top-tier weapon or equipment. Big brother Yifeng, looking at how happy you are, just what kind of items did the boss drop? Hurry up and share them with us. Don't just keep them to yourself. Blue Bamboo became exceedingly curious when she saw the smile on Shifeng's face. This was the first time she had raided a Grand Lord. Moreover, there was also a rumor going around in the outside world saying that Grand Lords had a chance of dropping epic items. Nothing much. I'm just happy because we managed to complete the Abyss set. Aside from that, the boss has also dropped a level 40 dark gold ranked shield, a level 40 dark gold ranked ring, and a pair of growth-type gloves, Shifeng said, laughing. He then shared the details of the shield and ring through the team chat. Frostbone shield, dark gold rank. Level 40, level 45. Equipment requirement: Strength 500. Defense plus 2720, level 40. Block rate 37%. Strength plus 43, Endurance plus 51. Ice resistance plus 10. Evasion plus 10. Weakens damage received from the front by 20%. Every time shield is struck, 10% of damage will be converted into user's defense. Up to a maximum of 2000 defense can be converted. Maximum HP increased by 10%. Additional skill dash. Frost Body. Becomes immune to all damage coming from the front for 4 seconds. Cooldown, 5 minutes. The defense on this shield is especially high. Just the defense on this shield alone is already a match for my total defense. Aqua Rose was dumbstruck after seeing the attributes of the Frost Bone shield. The Divine Blue Fire Shield Cola was currently using only had 1950 defense. However, the total defense the Frost Bone shield could provide was 4720 points. Not to mention, the shield itself also had a passive damage reduction skill and an active skill that provided pseudo-invulnerability. With this shield, they would be able to take on even the super powerful skills of bosses in the future. Particularly when the healers could not keep up with the damage the MT wielding the Frost Bone shield was taking, said MT could use Frost Body to alleviate the burden on the healers. Ice Spirit Ring Dark Gold rank. Level 40, Level 45. Equipment requirement. Intelligence 400. Strength plus 15, Agility plus 18, Endurance plus 24, Intelligence plus 55, Vitality plus 37. Casting range plus 2. Casting speed increased by 10%. Magic damage increased by 10%. Attacks have a certain probability to trigger freeze effect, freezing target for 3 seconds. Additional skill dash. Rapid cooldown, resets cooldown of all skills learned by user. At the same time, removes all control effects and increases casting speed and movement speed by 30% for 10 seconds. Cooldown, 10 minutes. After everyone saw the statistics of the Ice Spirit Ring, their eyes nearly fell out of their sockets. With this ring, a magical class's damage output would increase by at least 20%. Blue Bamboo said as she greatly admired the Ice Spirit Ring. This was the first time she had seen a ring with such amazing attributes. Ornaments were very rare in God's domain. Their value was much higher than even weapons. Despite being fully geared in top-tier equipment, the ring she currently wore was only a level 20 mysterious iron ring. However, she was very well off already. Many players were still wearing level 10 bronze-ranked rings. However, compared to the Ice Spirit Ring, her level 20 ring was practically trash. Don't get too excited. Whether it is the shield or the ring, the value of these two items most likely cannot be compared to this pair of gloves. Sure Feng then shared the stats for the gloves with everyone. Chapter 826, Background of the Number 1 Guild. Growth Type Equipment. Everyone looked at the image that was releasing a faint white glow. There were many divine runes carved on the pair of gloves. There was also a small dark blue magic array etched on the back of the gloves, with a light blue bead embedded in the middle of the magic array. Frost Gloves, Cloth Armor, Bronze Rank. Level 40, Level 90. Defense plus 348, Level 40. Intelligence plus 26. Vitality plus 22. Endurance plus 21. Additional passive skill dash. Force Chant. While casting, there is a 5% chance to cast Tier 1 or below spells instantly. Additional active skill dash. Frost Breath. Deals 500% magic damage in a cone to enemies within 30 yards and freezes all targets hit for 5 seconds, and then reduces their movement speed and attack speed by 40% for 15 seconds. Cooldown 1 hour. Gloves that had once been worn by the Frost King with frost beads embedded on the gloves, which were sealed by the Frost King, and are unable to display their full power. To lift the Frost King's 5-layered seal, a large amount of EXP is needed to be absorbed. Removing the first seal requires 300 million EXP. The upgrade requirement of this equipment sure is rough. Just the first seal requires 300 million EXP. Blackie raised his brows. This much EXP was enough to allow current ordinary players to level up once. Moreover, this was only the first seal. There would still be 4 more seals after this one. Needless to say, the following seals would surely have higher requirements. But the skills of this piece of equipment are amazing. It is capable of instant casting Tier 1 spells. Only the chances are a little too low. The AoE control skill, on the other hand, is quite good. With these two skills together, this pair of gloves would not lose out to any dark gold equipment, Aqua Rose commented. When Feng heard everyone's unbiased evaluations, he could not help but shake his head and laugh, saying, "Do you guys think that removing the seals will only improve the equipment's basic attributes? This is growth-type equipment. It can be upgraded into epic rank if you remove all of the seals. Whether it is the basic attributes of the gloves or its skills, both will gradually improve along with the undoing of the seals. Dark gold equipment definitely cannot compare to something like this." "This is epic equipment?" Everyone was surprised. Zero Wing's core members had a profound understanding of just how powerful epic items were. Compared to epic equipment, dark gold equipment was practically garbage. The two were on entirely different levels. Even just equipping a single epic weapon or equipment could instantly increase a player's combat power by a large margin, unlike dark gold equipment, where multiple pieces were required to display their advantages. "So this is epic equipment?" Autumn Goose and the others were momentarily at a loss for words when they looked at the frost gloves. While they were still at the stage of being joyful over getting a piece of dark gold equipment after defeating a great lord, Zero Wing had already set its sights on epic equipment. Over time, the gap between them and Thoughtful Rain would unquestionably grow increasingly larger. Following which, Feng held an internal auction between the members of Zero Wing. This scene caused Autumn Goose, Death Wind and Gunfire to grow exceedingly envious. They never imagined that, even for such powerful equipment, Zero Wing was willing to distribute them through an internal auction. In other guilds, such equipment was usually distributed based on the team leader's designation. In the end, the Frost Bone Shield was won by Yi Wumian, while Thoughtful Rain obtained the Frost Ring. This outcome greatly surprised Thoughtful Rain. Of course, part of the reason for such a result was because the other magical class members of the team had all set their sights on the Frost Gloves. Unfortunately, the gloves were still won by Aqua Rose in the end. After completing the equipment distribution, everyone teleported out of the Abyss battlefield together. As soon as the team appeared at the teleportation array inside the War God's Temple, a wide array of noises immediately entered their ears. Players recruiting for team members filled the War God's Temple. After just being away for a few days, the War God's Temple had undergone tremendous changes. Currently, players crowded the main hall of the War God's Temple. The levels of the players here as well had undergone significant changes. Originally, level 30 players were considered mainstream. Now, however, the majority of the players present in the main hall were around level 32. Among them, there was no lack of level 34 or 35 independent players. Also, these players were all relatively well equipped. However, shortly after Feng and the others appeared, the entire main hall went silent. Practically everyone within the building had shifted their gazes towards Feng's group. Aren't they Zero Wing's upper echelons? Damn, they're the real deal. As expected of the top-tier experts of Starmoon Kingdom. Even though I am standing so far away from them, I still can't help but shiver at the pressure they give off. Who are those three independent players beside them? All three of them are level 39. What? Level 39? The number 1 player on Starmoon Kingdom's ranking list just reached level 38 not long ago. Did they hide their levels on the ranking list? Just how did they manage to level up so quickly? It would be great if I can mooch off of them. Pros, carry me please. No one could believe their eyes when their gazes landed on Autumn Goose and the others. Feng and the other members of Zero Wing were wearing black cloaks so no one could identify their levels. Autumn Goose and the others, however, were not wearing black cloaks so everyone could see their current levels clearly. At this situation, Autumn Goose and the others could not help but feel slightly embarrassed. If not for Feng bringing them along to kill so many great lords, it would be impossible for them to reach level 39 so quickly. At most, they would have reached level 37 by now. After they returned to the Dark Knight Empire, the other members of the Wind God's Spear would also be shocked upon seeing their levels. Yi Feng, are you not coming with us to turn in the quest? Thoughtful Rain asked as she looked at Feng. I still have some matters to attend to, so I won't be going together with you, Feng said as he shook his head. He had just received a message from Melancholic Smile saying that representatives from King's Return wanted to meet him to discuss an important matter. After considering the situation for a long moment, the only conclusion Feng could come up with for this sudden visit was due to the matter relating to Sindheart. After all, Zero Wing did not possess any actual connections with King's Return. However, he also felt that the possibility of such a thing happening was low. A super guild like King's Return could easily annihilate an upstart guild like Immortal Light. Just like Nine Dragons Emperor of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, King's Return could simply take direct action against Immortal Light. There was no need for them to go through so much trouble to deal with a single upstart guild. However, since people from King's Return had come personally to visit him, no matter what was said and done, it was necessary for him to pay back their sincerity. As for the Silver Legend quest, even if he turned in the quest together with Thoughtful Rain and the others, the most he would get in return was a little EXP. That meager amount of EXP was practically negligible to him. Now that the final arc of the Silver Legend quest was complete, there was no need for him to tag along with the group anymore. Hearing Shifeng saying so, a hint of disappointment appeared on Thoughtful Rain's face. Zero Wings Guild Residence. Inside the large guild hall, Zero Wings members could be seen moving about busily. All this was due to the appearance of the guild stable. To purchase their own guild mount once they reached level 40, everyone began frantically taking on quests one after another, earning as much money as possible. This situation caused the entire guild to buzz with activity. However, inside the busy hall, two people were currently seated inside the reception room of the second floor, leisurely observing the situation inside the guild. They've managed to run the guild quite well. It's no wonder why Zero Wing is known as Starmoon Kingdom's #1 guild. Unfortunately, the guild's background is poor, and it doesn't have any expert nurturing capabilities. A robust man in silver heavy armor spoke disdainfully as he watched the situation downstairs. This man was a level 38 berserker. Although there were many elite players in Zero Wing, at the end of the day, they were only slightly better than the players of Starmoon Kingdom. They were no match for Empire players at all. It was especially true when comparing the levels of expert players. Currently, the highest leveled player in Starmoon Kingdom had only recently reached level 38. On the other hand, many of the players on Empire ranking lists had already reached level 39. At this moment, the doors to the reception room abruptly opened. Shifeng, who was currently using his appearance of Black Flame, then walked into the room. Level 40? How could this be? Chapter 827, Sword King Black Flame. As Shifeng entered the elegant reception room, he did not bother with disguising his current level. The robust man's gaze fixed on Shifeng, confusion filling his eyes. A guild in Starmoon Kingdom actually had someone higher leveled than the #1 player on the Glory Empire's ranking list. No matter how he thought about it, this was inconceivable. Their levels were already quite high, so they required a tremendous amount of EXP to level up. It was especially true for leveling from level 39 to 40. All those who held their rank on the ranking list practically grinded without rest. Moreover, ordinary experts could not compare to their efficiency. Usually these rankers had groups to lure and damage monsters for them. When the monsters dropped to their final strand of HP, these rankers would strike the final blow, taking the majority of the monster's EXP. Either that or these rankers formed teams who possessed AoE attack spells and had others lure hordes of monsters to these AoE teams. They would then rotate through each team, sharing the EXP as they killed the monsters. The basis of these systems was sacrificing other players' EXP. Only large guilds had the power to employ these methods. With such a grinding efficiency, the EXP these rankers obtained was many times more than what ordinary expert teams could earn while grinding. Only with this technique could they exceed other players by so many levels. Even so, Shifeng had still surpassed them by such a large margin. I am Black Flame. What business do you have with me? When Shifeng examined the two representatives, he realized that he had met one of them before. The robust man was none other than the berserker Thunder Tiger, whom he had met when he sold equipment in Blackwing City. Aside from the unruly-looking Thunder Tiger, Shifeng also recognized the indifferent youth beside the berserker. The youth's name was Ordinary Stranger. In the past, he had been one of King's Return's top 10 summoner experts. These two people were extremely powerful. Both could rank with Starmoon Kingdom's top 10 experts. Even the top-tier experts in first-rate guilds could not hope to compete with either of these two. Their levels alone made this evident. Among the two, one was a level 38 berserker, while the other was a level 38 summoner. Most likely, they leveled far faster than even the #1 player on Starmoon Kingdom's ranking list. Their equipment was even more impressive. Both were fully geared with level 35 top-tier dark gold equipment. The staff in Ordinary Stranger's hand especially. One could not judge the staff's quality based on its appearance alone. However, Shifeng knew that the staff in Ordinary Stranger's hand was a magic weapon. In God's domain, although there were far fewer magic weapons than epic weapons, they were significantly less difficult to obtain. One did not need to kill some kind of super powerful boss to obtain a magic weapon. Players also did not need to complete an epic quest. Instead, a magic weapon's procurement depended on luck. Players might unexpectedly obtain a magic weapon by completing a hidden quest. They might even find a magic weapon when they opened a high-ranking treasure chest. Although magic weapons had helped many players become experts, they had ruined far more. Ordinary Stranger was one of those people who had managed to control a magic weapon in the past. Hence, he had become one of King's Return's top-ranking experts. Otherwise, he would never have become one of the Super Guild's top 10 summoners. Hello, Guild Leader Black Flame. I am Ordinary Stranger of King's Return. My companion here is Thunder Tiger, Ordinary Stranger stated, a smile suddenly lighting his indifferent face. Although his smile contained no ill will, it looked horrifyingly forced. In truth, we have come to speak with you about a small matter. We hope that you can help us with this. Although he looked down on Zero Wing, he would show respect to a true expert. This was the 51st ranking expert on the God's Domain experts list, the Sword King Black Flame. Ordinary experts might not realize what such a rank implied, but as an expert from a super guild, Ordinary Stranger understood what it meant. The fact that Shi Feng had earned the 51st rank told him that the man had already reached the Void Realm. He was many times stronger than either of them. If a fight broke out, even if they worked together, they would not be a match for Shi Feng. After meeting Shi Feng personally, Ordinary Stranger felt that the man had grown a lot stronger. He was particularly convinced when he saw the exquisite mold and intricate runes of the weapons hanging from Shi Feng's waist. Although their special effects were hidden, he was certain that dark gold weapons could not compare to those two blades. Based on the rumors floating around, these two weapons could very well be epic weapons. Epic weapons. Even experts like themselves only obtained weapons like those in their dreams. Currently, only the guild's monster-level characters possessed epic items. As to whether or not those items were weapons, that was one of the guild's absolute secrets. Even they had no clue. Even a super guild like King's Return had gone to great lengths to obtain these epic items. Hence, it was truly hard to imagine that the guild leader of an upstart guild actually wielded two epic weapons. You're looking for my help? Interesting. King's Return is a super guild. Is there truly anything your guild can't do in God's domain? Shi Feng said, laughing. Guild leader Black Flame, you jest, Ordinary Stranger said hurriedly. We really need your help with this situation. Alright, tell me, what business do you have with me? Shi Feng waved his hand dismissively. Recently, we've heard that Zero Wing plans to buy some of Snowfield City's lands. We would like to dissuade you. In return, King's Return will provide Zero Wing with a plot of Light City's land, allowing the Candlelight trading firm to develop there, Ordinary Stranger explained. Although Snowfield City was the third largest city in the Twin Towers Kingdom, its player population could not compete with Light Cities. The difference between the two cities was simply too massive. Even an extremely ordinary plot of land in Light City was far more valuable than Snowfield City's golden lands. Can you tell me which plot of land you are offering? Shi Feng was slightly surprised. He had never expected King's Return to be so generous. Only the extremely wealthy could afford land in imperial capitals. Moreover, even if one managed to purchase one or two plots, without the endorsement from the city's ruling guild, one's business would fail. The ruling guild would cause all sorts of trouble to chase away their customers, going so far as to kill the players who dared to spend gold at their shops. This was especially true for imperial capitals in which super guilds had set up their headquarters. In a few years, the players within these imperial capitals would either become members of the guild, guests who had business with these super guilds, or players who supported these super guilds. It would be practically impossible these guilds' foundations in their home cities. Hence, even if one could afford the land in an imperial capital, most guilds usually avoided them. After all, these lands would only become expensive paperweights. Of course, it was a different story if one obtained the permission of the ruling guild. This was why Shi Feng wanted to cooperate with Phoenix Rain. Since King's Return would willingly allow the Candlelight trading firm to develop at Light City, once the trading firm set up a shop, that shop would most likely earn more money than 5 or 6 kingdom cities combined. After all, the player population in Light City was that massive. Here it is. Ordinary Stranger took out a drawing. This was none other than the map of Light City. A red dot had been marked on the map's top corner, representing the land for resale. The slums? Chapter 828, Chased Out. Shi Feng thought he had interpreted the map wrong when he examined the marked location. Cities in God's domain generally had many districts. Among them, the most important was the trade area. Normally, when players tried to set up a shop, they purchased land in the trade district. Following the trade area would be the nobles district. The nobles district housed the city's library and the war god's temple. Naturally, players frequently visited these locations. The commoners district followed the nobles district. The commoners district contained the Adventurers Association and the underground arena. Hence, that district enjoyed quite a bit of player traffic as well. The district with the worst traffic was the slums. There were practically no establishments in the slums that could attract players to the area. Very few players were willing to visit. Hence, in every city in God's domain, the lands in the slums there were the cheapest. Opening a shop there was no different than throwing money into the furnace. "This is your offer?" Shi Feng asked, laughing. After all that talk, King's Return wanted to trade a worthless location for 5 valuable plots of land. Guild leader Black Flame, don't be in such a rush. Many of Light City's lands have already been distributed. We cannot procure good plots of land with so little time. These are the only ones left. However, our superiors have stated that King's Return will allow the Candlelight trading firm to enter Light City to conduct business. If you are in a hurry to develop the Candlelight trading firm in Light City, you can purchase land with potential from others, Ordinary Stranger explained. In Ordinary Stranger's opinion, this offer was a powerful show of faith towards Zero Wing. Light City was King's Return's main headquarters. The city was home to more than 10 million players. In the future, that number could definitely climb to 20 million or even 30 million. It was not an exaggeration to say that every inch of land in Light City was worth its weight in gold. To obtain a share of this golden pie, all Zero Wing needed to do was to turn away from those 5 plots of land in Snowfield City. There were lots of guilds that hoped to set up a shop in Light City. The fact that King's Return had agreed to let the Candlelight trading firm set foot in Light City was an opportunity that many guilds dreamed of, but could not obtain. "What if I refuse?" Shi Feng asked. Although Ordinary Stranger's offer sounded nice, what fool would actually sell the high-potential land they had only obtained after so much trouble? In the end, Zero Wing had nothing more than an empty promise at the loss of 5 very high-potential lands. Wasn't King's Return being a little too arrogant? This, Ordinary Stranger was taken aback. He had never dreamed that Shi Feng would actually consider turning his offer down. Coldly he replied, "I hope that guild leader Black Flame will rethink this carefully. King's Return is a super guild. Is it really worth offending us over a few plots of land?" "Alright, enough. You two can leave now," Shi Feng said as he gestured towards the door. "Are you doing this because of Immortal Light?" Ordinary Stranger suddenly said coldly, "Guild leader Black Flame, think this over. I can tell you that Immortal Light is a sworn enemy of King's Return. We must annihilate this pest. If Zero Wing helps Immortal Light, you will incur King's Return's wrath as well." "Now that is interesting," Shi Feng said, his lips hooking up into a grin. He then continued, saying, "Do you think that Zero Wing is afraid of King's Return?" Hearing Shi Feng's bold question, both Ordinary Stranger and Thunder Tiger were stupefied. They had not expected Shi Feng to brush the Super Guild off like that. Super Guilds were different from other guilds. They were the true overlords of the virtual gaming world. In the virtual gaming world, aside from the few transcendent powers and other super guilds, nobody would dare disregard a super guild. However, when they thought back to how Zero Wing treated the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, it was possible that the guild would ignore King's Return's threat. "Both of you can get lost this instant. Oh, and go back and tell your superiors this. What Zero Wing does is of no concern of King's Return. I will buy those plots of land." "You can be certain of that," Shi Feng declared, a frosty glint flashing in his eyes. Sindheart had helped him many times in his previous life. Moreover, since he had already promised Sindheart to buy those lands, he would not go back on his word. He had only wasted so much time talking to these two representatives to gauge what King's Return stance was towards Immortal Light. Although Zero Wing could not defeat a super guild in Starmoon Kingdom, it had no reason to fear them either. As soon as Shi Feng finished speaking, the temperature in the room dropped by several degrees. Both Ordinary Stranger and Thunder Tiger suddenly felt their bodies grow cold. Their instincts shouted warnings, reminding them that they were in an extremely dangerous situation and that they could lose their lives at any moment. Both Ordinary Stranger and Thunder Tiger knew that they were not a match for Shi Feng. Helpless, they could only leave Zero Wing's residence without accomplishing their objective. What are we supposed to do now? Thunder Tiger asked as he looked back towards the guild residence. Are we just going to return and report this? What else can we do? Ordinary Stranger had not expected Shi Feng to be this insane. He was actually willing to offend King's Return for a meager guild like Immortal Light. Let's find a quiet location and report to Elder Broken City. We'll let the Elder decide how we should proceed. The two experts immediately ran to a high-class restaurant and rented a VIP room. They intended to report Shi Feng's reply word for word to Broken City. Meanwhile, Shi Feng arrived at the candlelight trading firm. Melancholic, how many strengthening devices has your team completed? Shi Feng no longer carried a fortune. Although he had earned quite a bit through Stone Forest Town and the candlelight trading firm while he had been gone, after deducting the guild expenses and the magic crystals, which could not be sold, he only had roughly 4,000 gold on hand. Of course, to any first-rate guild in God's domain, having 4,000 gold of liquid funds after deducting guild expenses was practically a dream. However, if Shi Feng wanted to purchase those 5 plots from Sindheart, he did not have nearly enough money. He also had a city waiting for him to build. Inside a VIP room in a high-class restaurant. Is that all? Broken City asked with gravelly tone through the video chat. Yes, that is all. After that, Black Flame chased us out, Ordinary Stranger explained softly. Since Zero Wing is adamant about poking its nose into our business, we should teach the guild a small lesson. I'll have Hell Fiend lead the Falcon Legion over. Find out where Zero Wing's core members are right now. When the time comes, we won't let any of them survive. Broken City declared before disconnecting the call. Both Ordinary Stranger and Thunder Tiger were stunned. Although they did not know why Broken City focused so heavily on a small guild like Immortal Light, sending the Falcon Legion to deal with Zero Wing was no more than making a big fuss over a small issue. The Falcon Legion was King's Return's Ace Legion. The Legion was comprised of the young experts the guild had nurtured and had been specifically formed to deal with other super guilds' legions. Moreover, Broken City was actually sending the Adjudicator Hell Fiend. One could just imagine how furious the old man was. Chapter 829, 5th Floor Master. Blackwing City. Many players hawked their wares on the wide, flourishing streets of the city. Shi Feng had already reverted to his original appearance and made his way towards the Blackwing auction house. It had only been a short time since Shi Feng last visited the city. The street the Blackwing auction house resided on had become a player market. It was even more lively than an empire's imperial capital. However, unlike other cities, one only needed an entry pass to enter Blackwing City. As players' levels continued to increase, more entry passes dropped. Hence, Blackwing City's traffic had increased by several times. At this point, Blackwing City had become the largest trade hub in God's domain. Even the 4 great empires' imperial capitals could not compete with Blackwing City. The transactions between the various large guilds here were astronomical. If one wanted to point out God's domain's most profitable locations, Blackwing City would definitely be one of them. The auction house in Blackwing City was also where guilds and independent experts of various kingdoms and empires preferred to sell or purchase items. This was because those who could reach Blackwing City were either lucky individuals who had gotten their hands on an entry pass, independent experts with a certain degree of strength, or players from the various large guilds. As long as one had a valuable item, they did not need to worry about it not selling in Blackwing City. They also didn't need to worry that players could not afford their prices. Hence, many players preferred to sell their treasures at the Blackwing auction house. Upon entering the Blackwing auction house, Shi Feng discovered even more players inside the establishment than those who camped on the street outside. It was especially true for the registration counters. Long lines of people had queued up in front of the dozen or so registration counters. Why are there so many people here? Shi Feng swept a glance over the sea of players before him. At the very least, there should be over 1,000 players present. If not for the Blackwing auction house's extremely large size, it would be impossible to hold so many people. While Shi Feng tried to figure out why there were so many players lining up to get into the Blackwing auction house, he suddenly heard a crisp, pleasant voice from behind him. Yi Feng, so you've received the news as well. Turning to the source of the voice, Shi Feng discovered none other than Gentle Snow, whom he had not seen for quite some time. Currently, Gentle Snow wore a set of silver sacred armor. On her back she carried a silver greatsword engraved with golden divine runes. A hint of bloodlust radiated from the greatsword. This faint bloodlust wrapped around Gentle Snow's body, making the woman seem like a goddess of the battlefield. Walking through the building, Gentle Snow attracted the passionate, watchful gazes of many male players. However, nobody in the room dared to approach Gentle Snow casually. Though her status as Ouroboros's guild leader was part of the reason, the main deterrent was the group of players accompanying Gentle Snow. Among this group, the lowest player was level 37, while the highest was level 39. In a kingdom, these players would rank at the very top of the kingdom's ranking list. Furthermore, every one of these players had an extraordinary origin. This was particularly the case for Hidden Cloud, the level 39 assassin leading the group. Hidden Cloud was a famous character that belonged to the Super Guild 9 Heavens Pavilion. He had been one of the talented newcomers that had entered the virtual gaming world 10 years ago. He had risen to prominence like a comet when he had joined. Through a relatively popular virtual reality game, he had earned numerous achievements. Afterward, the 9 Heavens Pavilion had paid an astronomical price to recruit him. Back then, his appearance had shaken the virtual gaming world. Moreover, after joining the 9 Heavens Pavilion, he had become the 9th floor master in just 3 years. His growth had left other super guilds speechless. There were a total of 9 floor masters in the 9 Heavens Pavilion. Each of them enjoyed an even higher status than the guild elders. They were the guild's absolute core members. The first floor master was the 9 Heavens Pavilion's guild leader. Chapter 830, Beginning of Fame. So, you're the rumored Yi Feng. Hidden Cloud, with his tanned skin, a robust body, and a slightly evil air about him, wore a slightly surprised expression as he looked at Shi Feng. The majority of God's Domain's players were completely clueless about what had happened in the Dark Arena. Not to mention, matches were held in the Dark Arena every day, making it even more difficult for people to follow a single battle team. To a super guild upper echelon like Hidden Cloud, however, there was no need to pay attention to the Dark Arena's ordinary experts. He was only interested in those who could leave an impression. Someone like Shi Feng in particular, who had defeated a famous old monster like Sirius, would catch his attention even if he wanted to avoid information on this expert. After all, his guild would remind him about such existences. Experts at Shi Feng's standard could not be ignored. Even in super guilds he would be a member of the top fighting force. He would be an apex expert the guild would use against its competition. They're just rumors. Shi Feng shrugged, chuckling. Hidden Cloud was an extremely powerful expert. His history was almost considered a legend. He had debuted into the virtual gaming world at the young age of 17. He was currently 27 years old and already he had become the 9 Heavens Pavilion's 5th floor master. He was the target of admiration for countless young players. In the past, Hidden Cloud's achievements in God's Domain had even pushed him to his peak. After spending 5 years in God's Domain, he had gained the position of 2nd floor master. In the 9 Heavens Pavilion, he had been the most likely candidate to become the next 1st floor master. However, Hidden Cloud's position in the 9 Heavens Pavilion had been secondary. The man himself was far more impressive. In the past, he had been one of the 10 great God-ranked assassins in God's Domain. No one throughout God's Domain had been able to stop any of his assassination attempts. Hidden Cloud's most impressive assassination had the death of a powerful upper echelon of the Flower of Seven Sins, which he had completed without any assistance. This incident had struck fear into the assassin organization and boosted the 9 Heavens Pavilion's prestige. After all, even super guilds did not dare offend a transcendental power like the Flower of Seven Sins. Many of these super guilds had suffered multiple losses at the hand of the organization. Super guilds had always suffered the Flower of Seven Sins' wrath. Never once had the organization suffered a loss of its own. The fact that Hidden Cloud had managed to defeat one of the organization's upper echelons had significantly boosted the 9 Heavens Pavilion's reputation. This incident had shocked the upper echelons of the various large guilds in God's Domain. Shi Feng had been no exception. I had never thought that Gentle Snow knew Hidden Cloud. It seems she has a few of her own secrets. Shi Feng glanced at the 4 people behind Hidden Cloud. These 4 were Hidden Cloud's brothers-in-arms. Every one of them was extraordinary. Even in the Dark Arena, they would be considered first-class experts. It was also thanks to these 4 people that Hidden Cloud had reached his current position so quickly. However, one thing confused Shi Feng. If Gentle Snow was acquainted with such a powerful existence, it should have been quite easy to secure the position of Ouroboros's guild leader during the previous mutiny, so much so that if Hidden Cloud had made an appearance, Chao Qinghua and the elders backing him would have surrendered. After all, it was well known that Hidden Cloud greatly valued his relationships. He had even extinguished a large guild just to help a brother earn a woman's affections. Judging by Gentle Snow's tone and expression when she spoke to Hidden Cloud, her brother should have a very close relationship with this man. Yet, in the past, Gentle Snow had still left the virtual gaming world eventually. This was truly a mystery. While Shifeng pondered this riddle, Gentle Snow turned Shifeng and smiled, saying, "Since you've only just learned about this, you most likely haven't purchased an entry ticket, right? If you line up now, the tickets will probably sell out before you get one. Why don't you join us? You will regret it if you miss out on the auction." The Blackwing auction house had organized the auction suddenly this time, and many guilds had rushed to purchase entry tickets the moment they heard the news. Now that the auction would begin soon, it was most likely be impossible for Shifeng to get his hands on a ticket. Shifeng had helped her earn a fortune in the Dark Arena. She had significantly increased Ouroboros's liquid assets because of it. Although Shifeng did not know that, Gentle Snow still thought that she should return the favor. After all, aside from helping her earn money, Shifeng had also helped her secure Ouroboros. As soon as Gentle Snow extended the offer, Hidden Cloud's expression darkened slightly, his gaze sharpening as he turned to Shifeng. "Thank you for your kind offer. However, I have another matter that I need to deal with first, so it is best if I don't disturb you." Shifeng did not wish to miss this rare opportunity. He needed to register his auction items quickly. As for whether or not he could enter the auction itself, that was not important. After all, his goal was to make money. "How much time do you need?" Gentle Snow prodded. "Roughly half an hour," Shifeng said as he glanced at the long queue. Although there were a lot of people at the registration counters, the registration process was simple and did not take very long. He should be able to finish what he needed in half an hour. That won't be an issue. In any case, there is still some time before the auction officially begins. "I can wait here for you in the meantime," Gentle Snow offered after a moment of consideration. "All right, I'll try to finish as quickly as possible." Shifeng nodded. Since Gentle Snow was willing to accommodate him, it would be rude to continue rejecting her offer. There would certainly be many valuable items for sale at Blackwing City's monthly auction. He might be able to purchase something good if he participated. If an epic item were available, he would hit the jackpot. "It sure is difficult to invite this man," Gentle Snow sighed as she watched Shifeng's departing figure. This was the first time inviting someone had been so difficult. However, shortly after Shifeng left, Hidden Cloud secretly messaged one of his brothers, whispering, "Blaster, research that man called Yifeng. Find out his origin. I want to know everything about him." "Boss, rest assured, I'll get it done quickly." The berserker named Blaster smiled confidently. He then began rapidly searching through the forums for all information relating to Shifeng. At the same time, he contacted a number of people to help him with the search. At the registration counter. After waiting for over 20 minutes, it was finally Shifeng's turn. "Sir, how may I be of service to you today?" the NPC female receptionist asked, smiling. "I wish to sell these items at this month's auction," Shifeng said as he revealed a strengthening device. "All right, please wait for a moment." The NPC receptionist received the strengthening device and began appraising it. Not all items were allowed in the auctions held in the Blackwing auction house. Items needed a certain value before being permitted. Hence, all items presented needed to undergo the system's appraisal. "I apologize for the long wait. Sir, the estimated minimum price for this item is 1 gold 40 silver. If you wish to sell this item at our auction house, we will charge you a 30% handling fee. Do you wish to put it up for auction?" The female receptionist handed the strengthening device back to Shifeng after she had finished. Only Blackwing City's auctions would charge a 30% handling fee. Other places charged 20% at most. Even so, Shifeng did not mind it. "Yes." Shifeng took out 2,000 strengthening devices and divided them into hundreds of auction lots, with each lot having anywhere from 1 to 100 strengthening devices. If he sold too many at once, it would only cheapen the strengthening device. The various large guilds participating in this auction should be able to stomach 2,000 devices. After dealing with the strengthening devices, Shifeng ran to meet Gentle Snow. He then entered the auction venue with Gentle Snow and her companions, quietly waiting for the auction to start. At this time, Blaster sent Hidden Cloud a private message reporting, "Boss, we've learned everything there is to know about that brat." Chapter 831, Great Disturbance. There sure are a lot of high-ranking NPCs participating in the auction this time, Shifeng commented as he swept a glance over the NPCs on the second floor, an amused smile appearing on his face. High-ranking NPCs? At Shifeng's comment, Gentle Snow turned to the second floor. Indeed, there were quite a number of NPCs present. But isn't it normal for high-ranking NPCs to participate in the Blackwing auction house? This was not her first time attending an auction in the Blackwing auction house. She had even attended high-ranking auctions before. Players were not the only ones to compete over items up for auction. NPCs similarly contested over the items. However, after some of her own research, Gentle Snow more or less understood these NPCs' function. These NPCs were here to make sure items were sold at an appropriate price. If the price players offered was too low, these NPCs would join the bidding. They would not let players take advantage of the system. At such a large auction, it was natural that more NPCs would join. However, when players tried to purchase an item, as long as the price they offered was higher than the item's actual value, these NPCs would automatically relent and end their bidding. In response, Shifeng smiled and nodded, saying, "It is very normal. Only I've never seen so many powerful NPCs attend at the same time, so I'm slightly surprised." "Tisich, what about these NPCs is surprising?" Blaster commented disdainfully. The others nodded in agreement, scorn flashing in their eyes as they looked at Shifeng. Initially, they had thought that Shifeng was one of God's domain's apex experts. Now, however, it would seem that he was just a country bumpkin that had never seen the world of the great. At the end of the day, he was simply the upper echelon of an upstart guild. There was no way he could measure up to their standards. Shifeng simply smiled at the group's reaction, not bothering to explain. However, Gentle Snow's expression turned serious at Shifeng's statement as she secretly observed the NPCs on the second floor. She did not think that Shifeng would be surprised just because there were a lot of high-ranking NPCs present. What? How can this be? When Gentle Snow's eyes fell on a handsome youth in a suit of golden armor and an exquisite cape, she was shocked. Previously, she had never bothered to observe the NPCs. Now that she did, however, she discovered something astounding. When she examined the handsome youth, she could not uncover any information about him. She could not even see the most basic of information such as his name or level. Even after activating an advanced identification skill, she was still left empty-handed. More frighteningly, when her gaze fell upon the youth, he actually turned and returned it, observing her. However, this youth simply smiled before turning away. Although they had only exchanged glances for a brief instant, Gentle Snow felt as if she had been suffocating. In that instant, she had felt as if her life was no longer her own. She had never encountered such an NPC before. She had not even experienced this feeling when she met with a Tier 5 NPC in an imperial capital. Tier 5 NPCs were considered top-class individuals even in an empire. Players could not encounter them casually. She had only met one due to a special quest. Moreover, there were also over a dozen Tier 5 NPCs on the second floor. Even if one added together the Tier 5 NPCs in an empire, there would be fewer than those that were here now. It was no wonder why Shifeng was surprised. Yifeng, with so many high-ranking NPCs participating in the auction, will something happen? Gentle Snow sent Shifeng a private message, wearing a nervous expression. Events frequently occurred throughout God's domain. If players could resolve these events, they could earn decent rewards. However, the penalties for failure were equally heavy. When these events occurred, players' consent did not matter. As long as one was within the event's area, the system considered the players to have accepted the quest. Events in God's domain varied in terms of sizes. The larger an event was, the more horrific its punishment would be. She had met the Tier 5 NPC due to an event. In the end, said event had claimed the lives of 99% of the tens of thousands of players that had been present. A lot of equipment had dropped that day and very few players had survived. She had been one of the lucky few. Unfortunately, because the event had not been completed, neither she nor the other survivors had received a reward. However, compared to the players that had died, she was considered very lucky. With so many Tier 5 NPCs here, She could not imagine what would happen if an event occurred. It's nothing major. Based on what I have learned, one can determine the value of the items that will be up for auction by the number of high-ranking NPCs that participate. The more NPCs that attend an auction, the more valuable the items will be that appear in said auction. Ordinary items wouldn't attract these hidden dragons, Shifeng explained. He could tell what Gentle Snow was worried about. So, that's the case. It's no wonder why you would check the second floor. Gentle Snow finally understood. Her tense mood began to vanish. However, Shifeng had hidden one truth from the Snow Goddess. More high-ranking NPCs joined an auction when there were more risks. It was especially true when an NPC like that mysterious young man attended. God's Domain was not a game that let players have their way easily. During the game's initial stages, conflict was limited to players. However, as players reached higher levels, the game would gradually introduce a new type of conflict: the conflict between players and NPCs. In the past, a powerful NPC had even robbed Shifeng. Hence, money wasn't the only thing necessary to purchase an item from the Blackwing auction house. It was a simple matter if one purchased an item from another player. However, if one purchased an item sold by an NPC, they would have to stay on guard. One might win the bidding for an extremely precious item, but keeping the item would depend on their ability. While Gentle Snow and Shifeng conversed in secret, the auction had officially begun. Above the auction stage, a beautiful female NPC wearing a white evening gown approached the stage as the auction's hostess. However, as soon as everyone noticed this beautiful, curvaceous NPC, their jaws dropped in shock. This NPC beauty was a level 220 Tier 4 Great Wizard. In any city she would be an Overlord-level NPC. However, such an existence had actually been tasked to host this auction. Everyone marveled at Blackwing City's wealth and influence. While the various players struggled with their days, the first auction item appeared before them. After examining the item's information, these players were thrown back into their stupor. The item was a golden tablet, radiating a purple-gold glow. Complex runes and images had been carved into the metal. With a glance, it was obvious that this tablet was anything but ordinary. A secret technique. Damn. This can't be real, right? The system is so generous to sell something like this at the very beginning. Our guild must have that. We had been right to join the Blackwing auction this time. Notify the others and tell them to purchase coins immediately. Buy as many as you can. We cannot let other guilds obtain this. Ordinary large guilds were completely clueless about the excitement that tore through the crowd. However, various super guilds and super first-rate guilds were thrown into chaos. These representatives eyed the golden tablet like ravenous wolves. Blaster, notify the guild elders immediately. Tell them to send as much money as they can as quickly as possible. Hidden Cloud shouted, excitement coloring his face. I understand. Not daring to delay, Blaster rushed out of the auction house and rapidly contacted the Nine Heavens Pavilion's elders. Chapter 832 Crazy Auction. Shifeng was similarly stunned for quite some time after seeing the auction window. A secret technique. This was a treasure that every expert dreamed of obtaining. He had never expected something so shocking to be the Blackwing auction house's first item. If he could obtain this golden tablet, he could help even more people from Zero Wing grasp a powerful combat technique. While Shifeng recovered from his shock, the bidding for the golden tablet had begun. Bidding for the golden tablet started at 100 gold. However, a few players present instantly bid on it like madmen. 110 gold. 120 gold. 700 gold. It only took a few short seconds to stun many of the players present. The golden tablet's starting bid had already been beyond many players, yet for just a piece of a broken tablet, someone was actually willing to pay 700 gold. Even to a third-rate guild, this was an astronomical price. A single third-rate guild would have 400 or 500 gold at most. Only second-rate guilds and above could afford such a price. Second-rate guilds, however, unless they had lost their minds, would not spend all their liquid funds on an unknown tablet piece. Suddenly Hidden Cloud shouted, 1,000 gold. This tablet belongs to the Nine Heavens Pavilion. Once again many players were dumbfounded. They had never expected a super guild like Nine Heavens Pavilion to be so insane as to willingly spend 1,000 gold on the golden tablet. Such big words. Do you think this item belongs to your family or something? A female elementalist with an exquisite body laughed pompously. 1,500 gold. Quiet Melody, what's the point of fighting it? Do you really think the sacred temple can compete with the Nine Heavens Pavilion? Hidden Cloud laughed. He then raised the bid, saying, 1,600 gold. To develop the guild, the sacred temple had recently spent a lot of coins to purchase land and magic crystals. Hence, the temple should be running low. It could not compete with the Nine Heavens Pavilion's financial strength right now. Of course, he had two goals in mind with his comment. First, he wanted Quiet Melody to retreat, while his second goal was to buy time. Hidden Cloud had not intended to pay much attention to the auction. He was mainly here to accompany Gentle Snow. Hence, he had not brought a lot of money with him. After pooling the money he and his companions had brought, they only had around 2,000 gold or so. If this were a normal auction, that would be more than enough. They could even purchase a piece of epic equipment. Now, however, it was most likely not enough to win the golden tablet. After all, that tablet was far more valuable than any single epic item. Currently, God's Domain's various super guilds searched for these tablets frantically, yet after investing so many resources and manpower, they had not found any clues leading to these items. There were no set patterns to acquiring these items. It was purely based on luck. Now that this tablet had appeared, he would spend more than 10,000 gold if he could purchase the golden tablet, much less several thousand. This item was like God's Domain's golden lands. Not only was it unique, but its value would also grow in the future. One could only encounter a treasure like this, not find one. However, his guild needed time to collect the required money. This made Hidden Cloud somewhat anxious. I never thought that the famous Hidden Cloud would be so arrogant. Quiet Melody covered her mouth with the back of her hand and laughed. Her laughter mesmerized many of the male players in the auction venue. It seems you really don't have much money on hand right now. Well then, I'll gladly buy this golden tablet on your behalf. 3,000 gold. The entire venue suddenly fell silent. The various guild representatives and the many independent players could not believe what they had just heard. 3,000 gold? With that much money, one could buy an ordinary plot of land in an imperial capital. Even to super guilds, this was a large sum of money, yet someone was willing to spend it on a piece of a broken tablet. This was insane. Just what kind of item is this? Gentle Snow was astounded when she heard Quiet Melody's bid. As expected of the sacred temple's vice-temple master, Shi Feng, on the other hand, silently praised the beautiful Quiet Melody. He had not expected the woman to see through Hidden Cloud's troubles with just a glance and act on it. While bidding for an item in a Blackwing auction, the item would be sold to the highest bidder once a period of time passed without a competing bid. Moreover, if one did not have enough money on hand, they would not be able to bid. Hidden Cloud's expression instantly soured when he noticed that his ploy had backfired. 3,000 gold was already far beyond his limit. If he had not provoked Quiet Melody and had gradually increased the bid, he could have earned some time for his guild to send more money. Now, however, he had lost the opportunity. Snow, how much money do you have with you? Lend it all to me. I'll pay you back with 10%, no 20% interest later. How about it? Hidden Cloud asked anxiously. This, Gentle Snow hesitated. Although she did not know the golden tablet's function, she could not outbid a super guild. However, her goal in coming here was to buy some items that were useful to her guild. If she lent all of her money to Hidden Cloud, it would be difficult to purchase the items she needed. After all, such auctions did not happen very often. 30%. Hidden Cloud shouted after hearing the hostess reporting the bid a second time. All right, I have 1,700 gold with me, Gentle Snow said after considering her options. Gentle Snow immediately traded 1,700 gold to Hidden Cloud, boosting his finances to 3,700 gold. 3,100 gold. However, a few seconds after he called out this bid, Quiet Melody once more shouted, 3,200 gold. At this point, Quiet Melody lost her composure. Although she had prepared some money before coming to the auction, she had not prepared a lot. Recently, to develop its businesses, her guild had purchased several plots of land. Hence, her available funds were limited. For this auction, she had only brought 3,500 gold. After Quiet Melody placed her bid, the other members of the sacred temple began to borrow money from other participants. However, a crisp sound echoed throughout the venue. 3,500 gold. Everyone immediately turned their gazes towards the new voice, discovering a beautiful young woman of similarly extraordinary origins. Phoenix Rain. Hidden Cloud glared at the smiling Phoenix Rain, who sat in the back row on the first floor. I am truly sorry, but the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion has set its sights on this item as well, Phoenix Rain said, smiling softly. Recently she had made a huge fortune in the Dark Arena. Although she had already spent some of that fortune for this auction, she had brought 4,000 gold with her. It was also obvious that both Hidden Cloud and Quiet Melody were reaching their limits. Hence, she had more than enough to obtain the golden tablet. 3,700 gold. Hidden Cloud yelled out his final bid. At the same time, he secretly sent a message to Blaster demanding, "Blaster, is the money not here yet?" "Boss, they're still in the process of collecting money right now. They've already mailed some of it to me, but I'll need to wait for another minute to receive it." Blaster was also jittery. However, the process of sending money in God's domain was not instantaneous. There was a short transfer time. 3,800 gold. Phoenix Rain increased the bid by 100 gold without hesitation. Both Hidden Cloud and Quiet Melody frantically tried to borrow money. However, borrowing such a large sum in such a short time was easier said than done. And yet, after Phoenix Rain had announced her bid, Shifeng motioned towards the hostess and said, 4,000 gold. Chapter 833, Stone Tablet Obtain. Yifeng. Phoenix Rain's mouth twitched slightly when she saw Shifeng suddenly raise his hand. She hadn't expected him to be here. Moreover, he had placed such a high bid. This placed her in a somewhat awkward position. She only had around 4,000 gold on hand. It would be difficult for her to continue bidding. However, Phoenix Rain's surprise was minor compared to the shock everyone else in the venue felt. This had been a contest between God's domain's major powers, yet someone from a lesser guild had actually dared to outbid them. He had practically issued a direct challenge. How does he have so much money? Surprise flashed in Hidden Cloud's eyes when he turned to the calm Shifeng. He had already read through the information his team had collected about this man. Shifeng had been an unknown pawn before entering God's domain, an insignificant existence that did not warrant his attention. However, after joining God's domain, Shifeng had begun to shine. During the game's early stages, he had only been well known in a town. Afterward, he had vanished from the public eye. The next time he appeared and displayed his strength was when he had helped Gentle Snow. Not only had he defeated Soaring Snake, one of Ouroboros' top experts, but he also helped Gentle Snow become the guild leader of Ouroboros. However, the match against Sirius in the Dark Arena had truly earned him fame. Nevertheless, compared to Hidden Cloud, Shifeng was still insignificant. Even if the swordsmen were more powerful at the end of the day, he was merely the upper echelon of a small guild. A small guild could never compete with the Nine Heavens Pavilion. The resources each guild commanded were on entirely different levels. Yet, a minor character like Shifeng had bid 4,000 gold. Shifeng was even richer than he was. However, after a brief period of silence, Quiet Melody suddenly shouted, 4,500 gold. She rose the bid by 500 gold instantly. Even Shifeng could only smile bitterly while shaking his head. Like Phoenix Rain, he had only brought around 4,000 gold. That was a close call. Luckily, I managed to borrow some coins at the last minute. Otherwise, I really would have lost the item to Phoenix Rain. Quiet Melody revealed a relieved smile as she turned to Shifeng. If not for Shifeng raising the bid and earning her some time, she would have lost this auction. Damn it! The sacred temple is going to snatch it from us. Hidden Cloud's frustration was overwhelming as he glared at the satisfaction on Quiet Melody's face. If he obtained the golden tablet, not only would the Nine Heavens Pavilion give him the right to use the tablet first, but he would have also made a huge contribution to the guild. Moreover, with the first usage rights to the golden tablet, he could nurture a group of trustworthy experts. With those experts by his side and his contribution to the guild, he could advance his position in the pavilion. Now, however, not only did he have to hand the golden tablet over to someone else, but that person was also a longtime rival. This was far more vexing than losing the golden tablet to Phoenix Rain. Yifeng, lend me your 4,000 gold. I'll pay you back with 30% interest, Hidden Cloud asked desperately, his voice no longer carrying any hints of superiority. Shifeng shook his head, saying, No, I want 50% interest. That's going too far. Hidden Cloud growled, killing intent lacing his words. 30% is already high. If you hurry, you'll lose the 30% interest and earn yourself a powerful enemy. Emotion warmed Gentle Snow's face. She had never thought that Hidden Cloud would ever make such a threat. His desperation truly confused the snow goddess. Just what kind of item was this golden tablet? It had actually driven Hidden Cloud to lose his composure. At this moment, the man before her behaved nothing like the Hidden Cloud she knew. Going too far? Shifeng grinned. Unhurriedly, he pointed his finger at the distant Phoenix Rain, saying, "The Phoenix Pavilion Master has also asked for a loan. Since you don't want to borrow it, I can lend it to the Phoenix Pavilion Master." You. Furious, Hidden Cloud wanted to rage. However, when he heard the hostess smash the gavel a second time, he gritted his teeth and said, "Fine. I promise 50%. On the surface, although Hidden Cloud had agreed to Shifeng's conditions, he changed his view of Shifeng from someone who needed a warning to someone who needed to be extinguished. Once the auction was over, he would introduce Shifeng to despair. Meanwhile, Shifeng had long since been prepared as he quickly retrieved a contract and handed it to Hidden Cloud. The terms of the contract were very simple. As long as Hidden Cloud signed it, he would obtain 4,000 gold. However, the assassin was required to return 6,000 gold within a day. If he violated the contract, he would have to pay Shifeng 3 times the amount he borrowed in credits. After Hidden Cloud examined the contract, his hatred for Shifeng deepened. This was the first time anyone had taken advantage of him to such a degree, yet he was powerless about it. Unfortunately, he could only swallow this humiliation and sign the contract. Immediately, an additional 4,000 gold appeared in his pockets. 7,000 gold. Hidden Cloud shouted. As these words echoed throughout the auction venue, even Quiet Melody was momentarily stunned. She couldn't believe that Hidden Cloud would be this decisive. She had only managed to gather a total of 5,100 gold. The auction would be long over by the time she gathered enough money to make a counterbid. This Yifeng really is hateful. Even though we are secret partners, he loaned the money to Hidden Cloud, Blue Phoenix huffed as she watched the calm Shifeng. I was truly blind to have thought of him as a good person. However, Phoenix Rain, who sat beside Blue Bamboo, remained silent as she seriously evaluated the distant Shifeng. She too had initially been angry. However, her anger quickly dissipated after she read the message Shifeng had sent her. The message was very simple. The golden tablet is dangerous. Although she did not know what kind of danger the golden tablet possessed, she did not think that Shifeng would lie to her. After all, she had a close partnership with Zero Wing. She had previously stated that after she obtained the golden tablet, she would split half of the slots to learn the secret technique with Zero Wing. This trade would benefit both sides. There was simply no reason for Shifeng to reject her offer. She also did not believe that Hidden Cloud would be generous enough to split any of the learning slots with anyone else. While Phoenix Rain pondered, the hostess smashed her gavel a third and final time. Congratulations to this gentleman for obtaining this tablet. Let us give him a round of applause. The beautiful hostess announced as she clapped her hands. I finally got it. At this moment, Hidden Cloud felt ecstatic. When the golden tablet rested in his hands, wondrous fantasies of a powerful future filled his mind. He then shifted his gaze to Shifeng, ridicule flashing in his eyes. Now that I've obtained the tablet, I'll take care of you soon. Shifeng paid no heed to Hidden Cloud's gaze. Instead, his eyes shifted towards the venue's second floor. The moment Hidden Cloud obtained the golden tablet, the mysterious youth on the second floor smiled happily at the assassin. When Shifeng had first laid his eyes on the golden tablet, he too had wanted it for his own. However, when he shouted his bid of 4,000 gold, he had turned his attention to the second floor. Indeed, just as Shifeng had guessed, this golden tablet was not some kind of treasure at all. It was a fatal poison. The instant he announced his bid, the mysterious NPC on the second floor had shifted his gaze towards him. Shifeng had lived in God's domain for many years, so he was very familiar with the game's NPCs. He was also very familiar with the look in the youth's eyes when he turned towards him. It had not been a look of curiosity or congratulatory. He had looked at Shifeng as a predator looked at prey. Since the golden tablet was the youth's apparent target, Shifeng had dropped out of the foolish competition for it. After the first auction item sold, the venue's atmosphere grew heated. The items that appeared afterward sold quickly, one after another. However, none of these items caught Shifeng's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, the next auction item is a precious tool in God's domain. With this, not only can you strengthen your defense, but you can also preserve your equipment's durability. This is definitely a must-have when adventuring. The female hostess then presented the attributes of the strengthening device. When the players in the venue saw the strengthening device's attributes, they were flabbergasted, and a passionate flame began to burn in their eyes. Chapter 834, Tool of Astronomical Value. There's actually such a thing in God's domain? The strengthening device was even enough to tempt gentle snow. As players reached higher levels in God's domain, battles grew increasingly intense. Against powerful monsters in particular, the burden on their equipment durability was massive. It was impossible for players to fight for extended periods in the fields. They had to return to towns frequently to repair their equipment. This limited their grinding and questing efficiency. Unfortunately, no one had found a tool in God's domain that could solve this problem. The only solution they had was to prepare several sets of equipment as temporary replacements. However, guilds simply did not have enough equipment to supply every member with multiple sets. It was especially true for top-tier equipment. Even a first-rate guild like Ouroboros had to rely on outside sources for equipment, not to mention other guilds. To make matters worse, as players faced higher-leveled monsters, equipment drop rates decreased. This had significantly slowed guilds' development. If guilds had a tool like the strengthening device, they could solve this problem. Although the strengthening device was somewhat expensive, compared to the cost of preparing 1 or 2 additional sets of top-tier equipment for a player, the strengthening device was a cheap solution. Gentle Snow wasn't the only person who had realized this. The representatives of the various large guilds also understood the value of the strengthening device. Unfortunately, only one device was up for auction right now. I wish more were up for sale, Gentle Snow sighed in disappointment. Although everyone shared her feelings, nobody held back when placing their bids. 2 gold. 2 gold 10 silver. 2 gold 30 silver. Although only one strengthening device was available, many people participated in the bidding. This was completely different from the golden tablet sale. The tablet's price would soar randomly by several hundred or thousands of gold. Small guilds simply could not afford to participate. However, they could compete for an item that only cost several gold. 5 gold. Hidden Cloud decisively raised the bid by a large margin, causing hesitation to ripple through the crowd. After all, if they call out a higher bid now, they would be challenging a super guild. They were not so desperate as to offend a super guild for a single strengthening device. Suddenly, Quiet Melody shouted, 6 gold. Melody, you think you can challenge me? Hidden Cloud sneered. He then shouted, 10 gold. Now that he had the golden tablet, the guild elders were extremely pleased with him and had marked down his contribution to the guild. Hence he was in a very good mood. Moreover, the guild had sent him the collected money. Even after paying off his debt to both Gentle Snow and Sure Feng, he still had around 5,300 gold. He was not afraid to compete with the sacred temple in the least. When the bid reached 10 gold, everyone promptly gave up. If they bought the strengthening device for 10 gold, they would lose money rather than saving it. After a moment of thought, Gentle Snow chose to give up as well. Only a single strengthening device was up for sale. Even if she obtained it, its impact was limited. After the hostess slammed her gavel 3 times, Hidden Cloud won the strengthening device. Unfortunately, before Hidden Cloud could celebrate his victory, the hostess presented another strengthening device. Unlike before, however, she displayed a stack of 100 strengthening devices. 100 devices? Gentle Snow was momentarily stunned. Immediately, joy blossomed in her heart. 100 strengthening devices would have a far greater impact than just one. It would be of great help during large-scale team quests. 300 gold. 310 gold. 500 gold. The bids continuously increased. You want to compete with your meager wealth? Hidden Cloud laughed. If he could obtain these 100 strengthening devices, he could contribute far more to the guild. He then shouted, 700 gold. 800 gold. Phoenix Rain bid. 1,000 gold. Hidden Cloud raised the price without hesitation. 1,050 gold. Quiet Melody gnashed her teeth as she rose the bid. If she missed the opportunity to purchase these strengthening devices, who knew when she would get another? 1,200 gold. Hidden Cloud leisurely raised the price once more. Even to a super guild, 1,200 gold was not a small amount of money. In the end, both Quiet Melody and Phoenix Rain could only relent. However, nobody could have expected that, after this stack of strengthening devices sold, a stack of 10 strengthening devices would appear on the screen. Damn. Is the system playing with us? Can't they just tell us how many strengthening devices will be up for auction? Although the various large guild representatives were excited that the strengthening device had appeared again, they also felt helpless. After all, who knew if this stack of strengthening devices would be the last available? For a time, everyone participated in another bidding war for the strengthening devices. As one strengthening device after another sold, Shifeng's elation grew. In the end, all 2,000 strengthening devices had been purchased, with an average price of 10 gold. After deducting the 30% handling fees, Shifeng earned a total of 14,518 gold. This was far more than he had initially expected. With this money, he would have no problem purchasing the 5 plots of land in Snowfield City. After the auction concluded, players began to filter out of the auction house. Boss, we really hit it big this time. Not only did you get the golden tablet, but you also bought plenty of strengthening devices. It won't be long before you secure the position of the 4th floor master. Blaster whispered his congratulations. It's still too soon to celebrate. Now that we have the rights to the tablet, as long as you guys put on a good show, it will only be a matter of time before I become the 4th floor master. Hidden Cloud laughed. He then shifted his gaze toward Shifeng, who walked alongside Gentle Snow, and said quietly, "But that Yifeng cannot stay. He swindled 2,000 gold out of me. He is looking to die. Send someone to keep an eye on him. Once I'm done dealing with the golden tablet, I'll teach him that it is not that easy to earn my money. Boss, rest assured, my men are already following him. He won't escape," Blaster reported as he patted his chest. He could only feel sorry for the swordsman. Throughout God's domain, there were very few people Hidden Cloud could not kill. He had even recently obtained an excellent dagger. The weapon was practically a nightmare for Hidden Cloud's targets. Just as Hidden Cloud and the others left the Blackwing auction house, everything on the street froze. What's going on? The players wandering the street were shocked. None of them could move, not even a step. They couldn't even make their fingers twitch. It was as if time had stopped and only their minds remained active. As the space had frozen, fear surfaced in everyone's hearts. They felt as if they stood in the middle of a ferocious beast's nest, and this ferocious beast had already stretched its jaws and was prepared to devour them all. Even Phoenix Rain, Quiet Melody, Gentle Snow, and the other top-tier experts were astounded by this surprising event, much less the various ordinary players. After all, it wasn't just players who could not move. Even the level 180, Tier 2 guards patrolling the street had been rendered immobile. Meanwhile, without anyone's notice, a black figure had appeared in front of Hidden Cloud and quietly overlooked the assassin. Chapter 835, Soul Disintegration. Who is that? Phoenix Rain, who had just exited the auction house, watched the mysterious youth slowly walk towards Hidden Cloud in disbelief. This was the first time she had encountered such a situation. Blackwing City was not an ordinary city. Even the city patrols were far superior to an imperial capital's. Yet, despite it the daylight hour, this NPC acted so boldly. The most unbelievable part about this situation was that even the Tier 3 guard captains had been frozen in place. This mysterious youth's power was incredibly frightening. "What are you trying to do?" Hidden Cloud asked the mysterious youth before him. He had only managed to force these words out after an intense struggle. He could clearly feel how terrifying the man before him was. The bloody glint in the man's eyes alone made him involuntarily shiver. Before this man, his power was as insignificant as a speck of dust. If this man wished it, he would lose his life instantly. His only option right now was to delay for time. What kind of place was Blackwing City? It was probably the safest location throughout God's domain. There was no way Blackwing City's authorities would allow an NPC to do as they wished. "Ah, you sure are an interesting little fellow. You're still trying to buy time? I advise you to give up. Although you are still in Blackwing City, this space is in a completely different dimension. Even a Tier 5 divine mage, adept in space magic, won't detect us here." The mysterious man smiled calmly at Hidden Cloud's question. "All right, will you hand over the golden tablet on your own, or will I have to retrieve it myself?" Although the youth's words had not been loud, Every player on the street had heard him very clearly. What? An NPC is robbing someone? Is this some kind of event? Isn't this NPC too strong? He's actually making a move inside Blackwing City. This isn't a legendary quest, right? The watching players were both excited and scared. Although this chance encounter was interesting, they were afraid of being caught up in the incident. A meaningless death at their levels would be a major, unfortunate loss. Golden tablet? What is that? I don't know what you're talking about, Hidden Cloud said, his mouth twitching as he stared at the mysterious youth. That golden tablet was his hope of advancing his career in the Nine Heavens Pavilion. Not only had he spent a large sum of money to obtain it, but the pavilion's upper echelons had also heard of his procurement already. If he simply handed the tablet to this NPC and returned to report to his superiors that he had lost it, acting as if nothing had ever happened, he would only enrage the Nine Heavens Pavilion's elders and guild leader. Handing over the golden tablet was scarier than death. Hearing Hidden Cloud's words, Shifeng glanced at the assassin, admiring the man's courage. When he had encountered an NPC robbery in his previous life, he had tried to resist as well. Unfortunately, he had not experienced a positive outcome. As he had not been strong enough, the NPC had successfully robbed him. However, being robbed was one thing. The true problem lay in the fact that said NPC had attacked. Dying by an NPC's hand had a far more severe penalty than an ordinary death. Moreover, the more powerful the NPC was, the heavier the punishments players received when that NPC killed them. Shifeng had been considerably lucky. His murderer had only been a Tier 4 Sword Emperor. In the end, he had lost 2 levels and suffered a weakened state for 5 days. Meanwhile, no matter how he looked at it, the mysterious youth was definitely stronger than a Tier 4 Sword Emperor. A lot stronger. You're not gonna hand it over? The youth sighed. It seems that I have to do it myself then. As soon as the NPC finished his statement, he stretched out a finger and lightly tapped Hidden Cloud's forehead. Peng. Ah. Hidden Cloud screamed with pain, sounding as if this pain came from the depths of his soul. In the next moment, Hidden Cloud's physical body disintegrated, revealing a half-transparent version of himself. However, this half-transparent Hidden Cloud began to fade. The assassin's scream grew in pitch and distorted, sounding almost inhuman. Amazing. This NPC actually knows soul disintegration. Shifeng was slightly surprised as he watched Hidden Cloud's body vanish in the wind. At this moment, even Shifeng had sympathy for Hidden Cloud. Shifeng had only seen soul disintegration in a video in the past. Not only could this attack kill players, but it could also damage a player's soul directly. It was similar to when he absorbed players' immortal souls. An immortal soul, as the name suggested, was an immortal existence. No matter how much damage an immortal soul took, it could recover. When Shifeng absorbed the immortal souls of the players he killed, he had only absorbed a tiny portion. Even so, this prevented the players from logging into God's domain for a short time. Soul disintegration was different. It was a skill purely meant to shatter a player's soul. It could destroy a player's immortal soul completely. Experiencing one's soul disperse was far more severe than someone or something absorbing a portion of it. Although players could also recover from this damage, it took far more than not logging in for 2 or 3 days. Shifeng would not be surprised if Hidden Cloud could not log into God's domain for half a month. Why fight it? Though even if you had handed it over, I would have still killed you. The mysterious youth shook his head as he looked at the golden tablet that had fallen from Hidden Cloud's body. The youth then turned to the other players on the street, smiling as he stated, "Anyways, now that I've obtained the item, let's celebrate with your deaths." A chill gripped the players' hearts as they heard the young NPC's words. "It's over," Phoenix Rain frowned, her previous hint of joy vanishing. Phoenix Rain wasn't the only one to have that reaction. Everyone trembled with fear. They had all heard the assassin's painful wails. Hidden Cloud was an apex expert from the Nine Heavens Pavilion. How much pain could cause an expert like that scream as he had? Yifeng had been telling the truth. Phoenix Rain suddenly remembered the message Shifeng had sent. Shifeng had warned her that the golden tablet was dangerous. Now, it would seem that she had also become one of this NPC's targets, and not even the heavens could save her. Damn it. This NPC is too black-hearted. He won't even spare innocent bystanders. Shifeng's expression darkened as he watched the mysterious youth's raised hand. He had miscalculated this time. He had never imagined that he would become entangled in the robbery as well. The NPC robberies he had encountered in the past had usually only involved the targeted players. If bystanders kept to themselves, the NPCs would leave them alone. Unfortunately, it was too late to do anything now. In the next moment, an endless amount of mana gathered in the youth's hand. It was as if he had sucked all of the mana in this space into his palm. With this much mana, the spell the youth was conjuring was likely stronger than a tier 5 skill. The mysterious youth smiled and pointed a finger to the sky. Immediately, the black ball of mana shot up from the youth's hand. After reaching a certain height, a crack suddenly appeared in the mana ball. Chapter 836, Tablet Secret. Just who is this mysterious youth? Shifeng was slightly shocked as he looked at the cracking ball of mana in the sky. The skill the youth had used was a tier 5 curse. Dark Paradise. Even tier 6 gods would fear this move. The power that the curse contained could turn all the players on this entire street into ashes instantly. Most likely, the penalty they would suffer would not be any lighter than hidden clouds at all. Disappear. The mysterious youth then flew up towards the sky. In the next moment, the black ball of mana transformed into a black hole that began sucking and devouring everything in its surroundings. As the suction grew stronger, the black hole expanded. Players on the street were even getting pulled off the ground. Damn it. Shifeng abruptly activated Heavenly Dragon's power and Blade Liberation, and his strength attribute immediately surpassed that of a Lord-ranked monster of the same level. Space Freeze, the skill that the youth had used earlier, was partially a control skill. After activating Heavenly Dragon's power, Shifeng became immune to all control skills. Unfortunately, the strength suppression as well as an extremely powerful mental suppression was still present inside the frozen space. Even without the original control effect, moving inside the frozen space remained impossible with the attributes of current players. Only by using twofold Berserk did Shifeng have a chance of moving. Sure enough, this strength suppression is intense. When Shifeng tried to shift his body, it felt as heavy as lead. Oh, there's still someone who can move? The mysterious youth was slightly surprised as he swept his gaze towards Shifeng. You are the first tier 1 class capable of moving under my domain. At this moment, Shifeng could already twitch his fingers. However, his body was still immobilized. Unfortunately, under Dark Paradise, even if you can move, you cannot escape. However, as soon as the mysterious youth said these words, a low shout entered everyone's ears. Shatter. As the sound of this low shout echoed throughout the entire space, the frozen space instantly shattered. You actually dare make such a huge fuss inside Blackwing City? Your courage is truly commendable. In the next moment, a woman dressed in white sacred robes appeared in the sky, overlooking the mysterious youth. Or are you saying that you intend to make Blackwing City an enemy? Upon regaining his freedom, Shifeng looked at the woman in white, and he could not help but shout in surprise, Charlene. Shifeng knew full well just how powerful Charlene was. Every time he met her, the woman's strength had received a significant improvement. At the very beginning, she had been playing the role of a female bandit. Afterwards, she had transformed into a tier 3 divine official. Later on, she had even become a tier 5 red official. Now, she was even more powerful, actually managing to directly shatter the mysterious youth's domain. While Shifeng was still in shock, a red jade staff appeared in Charlene's hand. The instant the staff appeared, the mana in the surrounding space stopped moving altogether. Charlene then lightly tapped her staff and, boom. The black hole abruptly disappeared from the sky of Blackwing City. It seems I've underestimated Blackwing City's capabilities, the mysterious youth said as he looked at Charlene. However, it is still impossible for Blackwing City's magic arrays to hold me captive. Saying so, the mysterious youth transformed into a streak of light and vanished from everyone's sight. He sure is quick in running away. The youth's disappearance did not surprise Charlene. After sending Shifeng a glance, she too vanished from the sky, leaving behind only a group of dumbfounded players. What kind of situation is this? Isn't that NPC a little too amazing? He actually succeeded in killing a player inside Blackwing City and got away safely on top of that. Excited expressions appeared on the faces of the players on the street who had witnessed this scene. This was their first time experiencing the power of a high-tiered NPC. In front of these NPCs, even the current strongest player in God's domain would be no different from an ant. However, their excitement was more due to their anticipation of high-tiered classes. Meanwhile, news of this matter also spread throughout God's domain at the speed of light. I never thought that there would also be such a risk when buying NPC-sold items from an auction. It seems I'll have to be careful when purchasing items in the future. When Gentle Snow thought about her purchases for the guild, she could not help growing anxious. Let alone that mysterious youth, even a level 100 Tier 2 NPC could put her in a huge bind. If a Tier 3 NPC appeared, then only death would await her. In reality, Gentle Snow wasn't the only person who had such thoughts. The representatives of the various large guilds shared her fears. In the future, when they were purchasing treasures sold by NPCs in an auction, they would have to estimate properly whether or not they had the ability to protect the treasures they wanted to acquire. If they were not confident in protecting a treasure, they would not buy it. Otherwise, they could lose both their lives and money. He's finally gone. Shifeng breathed out a sigh of relief as he saw the mysterious youth disappearing. Had Charlene come even 1 or 2 seconds later, he would have had to surrender to fate and gotten sucked into the black hole. At that time, not only would he have lost several levels worth of EXP, but he also would not have been able to log into the game for several days. It definitely would have dealt a fatal blow to his gaming career. However, as soon as Shifeng relaxed, Charlene's voice suddenly entered his ears. "Come to the library. I have some things to say to you." System: you have triggered the Epic Quest Tablet Secret. Quest content: head to White River City's library and meet with Charlene. What? Shifeng was momentarily stunned when he heard the system notification. Even an NPC robbery can trigger a quest. This was Shifeng's first time to encounter such a situation. Generally, if one had a certain amount of strength, they would be able to repel an NPC robbery easily and protect the merchandise they bought from the auction house. One could say that having sufficient financial power was only the first threshold to purchasing a treasure from the auction house. At the end of the day, whether one would be able to obtain the treasure depended on their own abilities. Hidden Cloud had purchased the golden tablet at a high price. If the assassin were to learn that Shifeng had fortuitously gotten such a chance encounter due to his sacrifice, he would most likely faint from anger. At this moment, however, Hidden Cloud had long since flown into a rage. Damn it! Damn it! That damnable NPC actually dared to steal my tablet. Hidden Cloud bellowed as soon as he exited his virtual gaming cabin, an extremely ugly expression on his face. Now that he had lost the golden tablet, the upper echelons of the guild would definitely be angry. This feeling of falling from heaven straight into hell maddened Hidden Cloud. After Shifeng had triggered the quest, he did not hurry to return to White River City. Instead, he bade farewell to Gentle Snow and secretly went to a private location and disguised himself. He then returned to the Blackwing auction house and placed the remaining 3,000 strengthening devices up for sale at the establishment. Rather than selling all 3,000 devices at once, he split them up into batches and scheduled them for different time slots. However, instead of selling them in stacks, he would sell anywhere from 10 to 20 individual pieces for each time slot. If he sold the strengthening device at the Candlelight Trading Firm, he could indeed earn a lot more money. After all, he would not need to pay an exorbitant handling fee. He could even increase the trading firm's fame this way. However, strengthening devices were not items that ordinary players could easily afford. Only the various large guilds gathered at Blackwing City possessed the financial reserves to purchase these items. When Shifeng's first batch of 10 strengthening devices went up for sale at the Blackwing auction house, it immediately triggered another commotion in Blackwing City. Isn't this the strengthening device that appeared in the monthly auction? Chapter 837, Lakeheart City. Inside the Blackwing auction house. The moment the strengthening devices appeared once more, various members of large guilds, who had been idling around in the main hall of the auction house, began frantically contacting the upper echelons of their respective guilds. The strengthening device from the monthly auction held just before had already become famous. It had even caused a commotion on God's Domain's official forums. Currently, the monsters in God's Domain were growing more powerful. It would be a miracle if an ordinary player's equipment could last them over 10 hours of grinding out in the fields. If these players frequently fought elite or stronger monsters, their equipment's durability would decline even faster, generally lasting 8 hours at most. Guild elite members might be able to hold out for a little longer. However, the current mainstream grinding spots were becoming farther and farther away from cities. Just making a round trip would cost players a lot of time, so much so that their travel time might be even longer than the time they spent grinding monsters. To the elite members and upper echelons of guilds, time was money. It was especially true for the time of guild experts. To develop their guilds, not only were these experts required to maintain a strong lead in levels, but they were also required to raid field bosses and dungeons to procure equipment for the guild. Naturally, these experts could not afford to waste all their time on travel. The obvious solution to this problem was to prepare extra sets of top-tier equipment. However, this method was simply too extravagant even for guilds. While the monthly auction was still ongoing, the various large guilds had immediately experimented on the strengthening devices they acquired. As a result, they had already gained a relatively precise understanding of the item's effects. Previously, they could only make a rough guess based on the introduction of the item. Hence, upon conducting their tests, these large guilds were shocked. Although the strengthening device could only extend a player's grinding time by 3 to 4 times, the better the equipment the strengthening device was used on, the greater the effects. In addition, while battling, the bonus durability provided by the strengthening device would be the first to diminish instead of the equipment's own durability. In other words, as long as players still had strengthening devices on hand, they could devote their time to grinding. They would not have to prepare any additional equipment, neither would they need to return to a city to get their equipment repaired. If allocated to ordinary or elite players, the 10 gold strengthening device would indeed be very extravagant. However, when assigned to an expert player, it would not be one bit extravagant. On the contrary, it would be a profit instead. Unfortunately, the strengthening devices were sold only in the monthly auction. This situation caused many large guilds that had not participated in the auction great frustration. Now that the strengthening device had appeared in the auction house as a player-sold item, how could the members of the various large guilds not grow frantic? Just a few minutes after the strengthening device's appearance, the price for a single unit broke past the 9 gold threshold. Moreover, the price was still increasing rapidly. Even Shifeng had not expected the strengthening device to be this popular. When he exited the auction house, he saw group after group of players rushing into the building. Why is Phoenix Rain suddenly contacting me? Just as Shifeng was preparing to leave Blackwing City, he suddenly received a call from Phoenix Rain. However, the person she was contacting was not Yi Feng but Black Flame. Guild leader Black Flame, have you heard? There is a player selling strengthening devices at the Blackwing auction house right now, Phoenix Rain said through the video chat, smiling. Yes, I've also just heard about it. Shifeng nodded, having already changed to his Black Flame guise. But why is Phoenix Pavilion Master contacting me? I want to purchase a large number of strengthening devices, so I wish to borrow some money from you. Of course, I won't borrow it for nothing. 3 days later, I'll return it to you with 30% interest, or you can buy a high potential land in one of the Black Dragon Empire's major cities from me. Phoenix Rain smiled as she extended a tempting proposition. Originally, she had not wished to borrow money from Shifeng. However, with the appearance of the strengthening device, and based on her newfound knowledge regarding the item, she had a great opportunity for the Phoenix Pavilion to surpass the Heavenly Dragon Pavilion. Level 40 was an important turning point in God's domain. With the strengthening device, she could rapidly raise a group of experts to level 40. At level 40, even using only common mounts would still bring about explosive improvements to their leveling speeds. They would be able to develop new maps earlier than other guilds. However, she had already spent a large part of her funds to purchase other items during the monthly auction. She did not have enough to contest for the strengthening devices, not to mention needing money to buy mounts. Hence, she gave Shifeng such a lucrative offer. Of course, the reason why she had looked for Shifeng to borrow money from and not someone else was mainly because Zero Wing was simply too wealthy. Zero Wing had relatively few members. The guild's various departments were also incomplete. The guild's expenses were not particularly high either. Moreover, Zero Wing was the proud owner of Starmoon Kingdom's wealthiest trading firm, the Candlelight Trading Firm. The guild also possessed the enviable Stone Forest Town. The guild's daily profits were in no way inferior to even those of a super first-rate guild like the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Due to these reasons, the wealth Zero Wing possessed could make even her envious. Just from the bid Yi Feng had placed earlier on the golden tablet, one could tell how rich Zero Wing was. Alright, but I want to purchase land at the Black Dragon Empire's Lake Heart City. Shifeng inwardly cheered upon hearing Phoenix Rain's words. He had never imagined that the woman would be so desperate. However, I'll say this first. I still have other uses for my coins. I won't buy it if your price is too high. Although he had previously purchased some potential land in the Black Dragon Empire and subsequently established the candlelight trading firm at these locations, there was a limit to his funds. Currently, large guilds within the empire had long since bought up the majority of the potential land in the empire's major cities. Even if Zero Wing could afford to purchase them now, nobody would be willing to sell any of their lands. Now that Phoenix Rain was willing to sell potential land, he naturally had to take advantage of the opportunity. In the future, the value of these plots would increase manifold. It was especially true for the land in Lakeheart City. Lakeheart City was a small island city located within the Black Dragon Empire. The island itself was situated in the middle of Mist Lake, the Black Dragon Empire's largest lake. Lakeheart City was also a producer of one particular item. And that item was the Ice Jade. On its own, the Ice Jade was an item that could raise a player's ice resistance temporarily. It could also be processed into ice resistance gemstones, which could be inlaid into equipment, similar to regular gemstones, and greatly increase a player's ice resistance. During the initial stages of the game, this item was not particularly valuable. After players reached level 50, however, the value of Ice Jades would multiply. At that time, the demand for the item would exceed its supply. Likewise, the value of the lands of Lakeheart City would also increase markedly. Previously, there had been too many lands that Zero Wing had to purchase. However, the guild's funds were extremely constrained. Hence, it had to limit its purchases to a few cities. Although it had earned enough money later on, by then, the potential lands of Lakeheart City had long since been bought clean. As for the golden lands of the city, Zero Wing had neither the money nor reputation required to purchase them. In the end, the guild had no choice but to settle for an ordinary plot of land. Lakeheart City? Phoenix Rain checked and discovered that there were indeed 2 plots of high potential land under her name in Lakeheart City. Moreover, although Lakeheart City was one of the major cities in the Black Dragon Empire, the player population there was not particularly high, as the city was mainly a tourist spot for casual players. She had never imagined that Shifeng would actually be interested in such a location. Alright. I have land that is close to the auction house there. I'll sell it to you at market price, which is 6,200 gold. However, I also want to borrow an additional 4,000 gold. I'll return the 4,000 gold 3 days later. How about it? Deal. Shifeng immediately grew ecstatic when he saw the location of the land in the map Phoenix Rain had sent him. With this plot of land, he would gain another income source for his city-building funds. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.